Before history learned to write, something learned to build. Across wind-scoured deserts and forgotten jungles stand structures that should not exist. Monuments carved with precision, aligned with the heavens, and rooted in a time we barely understand. They challenge timelines, mock our assumptions, and whisper of knowledge that vanished long before recorded memory. Who designed them, and how, without tools we recognize? Were these the first experiments of human genius, or echoes of a lost understanding we can no longer access? In this journey, we'll step beyond accepted history and look closely at what these ancient structures are still trying to tell us. Perched quietly on the wind-swept Orkney landscape, where the rolling hills meet the gray Atlantic sky, lies a rock unlike any other. Small, unassuming, yet utterly enigmatic. This is the Dwarfie Stane, a single block of red sandstone, carved into a rough chamber, its hollow interior barely large enough to hold a person. At first glance, it appears almost natural, a solitary stone weathered by centuries of wind and rain. But closer inspection reveals subtle marks, straight edges, and a doorway meticulously cut into the rock, a testament to human hands. How did its creators carve such precise shapes without the tools we associate with later stonework? The Dwarfie Stane is often described as a chambered tomb, one of the few examples of Neolithic rock-cut architecture in Scotland. Archaeologists date it broadly to the Bronze Age or earlier, noting its similarities to other tombs and ritual sites in Orkney. The interior consists of a single chamber with a low bench along its sides and a small passage leading to the entrance. Its orientation appears deliberate, yet its precise purpose remains elusive. Unlike larger cairns or megalithic complexes, it is solitary, intimate, almost secretive, more a hidden room than a monumental shrine. Local legends have long surrounded the Dwarfie Stane. One tale tells of a race of dwarfs who carved the stone with supernatural skill. Others whisper that it was a place of initiation, a chamber designed not merely for burial, but for rites we can only imagine. Scholars debate whether these stories reflect ancient memory or later folklore. Yet the mystery lingers, stubborn and seductive. The marks inside the chamber are smooth in some places, rough in others, almost as if the work was deliberately uneven. A challenge, a riddle, or perhaps the result of techniques we have yet to understand. Theories abound. Mainstream interpretations frame it as a ritual tomb, its modest size suggesting private burials or offerings rather than communal interment. Yet its design is unique. Unlike other Neolithic tombs, it shows no signs of external construction. The stone itself was chosen and carved in situ, a task requiring patience, skill, and ingenuity. How exactly did ancient people shape the interior so precisely without advanced tools? How long did it take to hollow out this massive block of sandstone, and for what purpose? Fringe theories have emerged over the years, some suggesting that the Dwarfie Stane was more than a tomb. Could it have been a sacred chamber, a meditation space, or even an observatory? Its small size and unusual isolation spark questions. Why build such an elaborate chamber in such a remote spot, far from the major ceremonial complexes of Orkney? Some researchers point to alignments with the rising sun on particular dates, hinting at astronomical knowledge far ahead of its time. Others wonder whether its makers left behind secrets now lost, encoded in the shape, orientation, or even in the echoes of the chamber itself. Standing before it today, one cannot help but feel the weight of millennia. The Dwarfie Stane is quiet, yet it resonates with history. Its walls, carved by hands long gone, speak not in words, but in silence. We can measure its angles, map its interior, and compare it to other Neolithic sites. yet the human intent behind it remains tantalizingly out of reach. Why this singular stone, in this particular place? What knowledge guided the chisel? What meaning did it hold for those who labored to hollow it out? Perhaps part of its allure is precisely this uncertainty. It defies easy explanation, sitting at the crossroads of fact and speculation, archaeology and myth. The Dwarfie Stane reminds us that the past is not merely a record of objects, dates, and events, but a living question, one that challenges our assumptions about skill, purpose, and imagination in a world we can scarcely reconstruct. As we step closer, peering into its shadowed interior, we are confronted with the most human of mysteries, the knowledge that some things, no matter how carefully studied, may remain just beyond our grasp. As we leave the windswept solitude of Orkney and the enigmatic hollows of the Dwarfie Stane behind, our journey carries us southward, across the Irish Sea, to the lush, rolling fields of County Sligo. Here, amid the gentle rise of grassy hills and the soft murmur of streams, lies the Creevykeel Court Tomb, an imposing monument of stone that has endured for over 5,000 years, yet continues to defy complete understanding. Its presence is at once grounded and otherworldly, a reminder that ancient peoples were shaping their landscapes with intention, knowledge, and a sense of the sacred that remains just beyond our comprehension. From a distance, Creevykeel appears deceptively simple, a linear cairn of carefully placed stones, its long facade forming a gentle curve that hints at the chambers concealed within. But as one approaches, the details emerge: the central court, open to the sky, framed by upright slabs that rise like silent sentinels. Beyond the court lies a series of chambers, narrow, elongated, and subtly stepped, their entrances carefully aligned. The craftsmanship is deliberate, meticulous, yet somehow effortless, suggesting a deep familiarity with stone, geometry, and perhaps the rhythms of the land itself. Archaeologists classify Creevykeel as a court tomb, part of a broader tradition of Neolithic passage graves that stretch across Ireland. Carbon dating places its construction roughly between 4,000 and 3,500 BCE, during a period of profound transformation in prehistoric Ireland, when farming communities were establishing permanent settlements and marking the landscape with enduring monuments. Excavations have revealed human remains, pottery shards, and polished stone tools, evidence of ritual activity intertwined with burial practices. Yet, even with these clues, many questions linger. The open court at Creevykeel is particularly striking. Unlike more enclosed passage tombs, the court is a shared space, perhaps a place of gathering, ceremony, or observation. Why this design? Was it meant to welcome the living as much as it commemorated the dead? Scholars suggest the court may have been a stage for ritual performance, a space where communities interacted with ancestors or the natural world. And yet, despite decades of study, no definitive explanation accounts for the choice of orientation, the precise arrangement of slabs, or the interplay of sunlight and shadow within the chambers. As with many ancient sites, the line between fact and speculation is both delicate and compelling. Some researchers note that the long, low cairn aligns roughly with the winter solstice sunset, hinting at a sophisticated understanding of astronomy. Others propose that the chamber's shapes and proportions were symbolic, encoding cosmological or spiritual knowledge that has since vanished. Local folklore adds further layers. Tales of fairy rings and otherworldly guardians whisper through the surrounding fields, suggesting that Creevykeel, like the Dwarfie Stane, was not simply a tomb, but a liminal place, where the boundaries between the human and the divine, the living and the dead, might have been intentionally blurred. The tomb's enduring mystery is accentuated by the sheer effort required to build it. Massive slabs were quarried, transported, and arranged without metal tools or draft animals. Every stone, every alignment, every carefully cleared space required coordination, skill, and purpose. What motivated these communities to invest such energy and care into a structure that seems at once practical and symbolic, tangible and elusive? Could it have been a monument to lineage, a celestial calendar, a spiritual theater, or something else entirely, now lost to memory? Even today, visiting Creevykeel evokes a profound sense of connection and wonder. The air is quiet, punctuated only by the rustle of grass and the occasional bird call. Walking through the open court, tracing the stones of the chambers, it is impossible not to feel the presence of those who shaped this space millennia ago. Their intentions remain opaque, yet their legacy endures in every carefully placed stone and every line of sight carved into the landscape. Here, as in Orkney, the past does not yield its secrets easily. It invites reflection, study, and, above all, curiosity. Creevykeel challenges us to think beyond conventional explanations. It prompts questions about the relationship between architecture and ritual, between community and landscape, between human skill and the mysteries we cannot yet decipher. Perhaps its true meaning lies not in the artifacts recovered or the measurements taken, but in the sense of wonder it evokes, a reminder that history is not merely a catalogue of facts, but a dialogue between the present and the voices of the past. As we stand in the shadow of these upright stones, looking through the open court toward the distant horizon, we are confronted with a question that has endured for generations. What did the builders of Creevykeel see when they gazed upon their world, and what did they hope to leave behind for those who would follow? The answer, if it exists, remains tantalizingly out of reach, hidden somewhere between earth and sky, stone and spirit. And so, the mystery persists, quietly inviting us to linger, to look closer, and to wonder what else may yet be hidden among the ancient stones of Ireland. As we leave the quiet fields of Sligo and the structured silence of Creevykeel behind, our journey stretches eastward, across the continent, to the rolling countryside of Wallonia, Belgium. Here, in the small village of Wéris, the land itself seems to whisper of the distant past. Amid gentle hills and open meadows, enormous stones rise from the earth, arranged with precision that has long captivated the imagination of historians, archaeologists, and travelers alike. The Wéris Megaliths are not a single monument, but a series of dolmens and standing stones, silent witnesses to a time when communities shaped their world with skill, knowledge, and an understanding of forces we are only beginning to grasp. From the moment one steps onto the path leading to these ancient stones, the sense of scale is immediate. Upright slabs, some towering over 3 meters high, are positioned with careful alignment, forming elongated chambers, passageways, and stone circles. The largest of these, the Dolmen of Opagne, appears almost monumental in its simplicity, massive stones placed to create a chamber that could barely contain a person, yet its presence dominates the gentle landscape. The stones themselves are unremarkable in composition, limestone and sandstone common to the region, but extraordinary in the way they have been transported, positioned, and preserved for thousands of years. How did prehistoric peoples, lacking advanced machinery, manage to move and erect such masses with apparent ease? Archaeological study places the Wéris structures firmly in the Neolithic period, roughly between 4,500 and 2,500 BCE. Excavations have revealed cremated remains, pottery fragments, and stone tools, all suggesting that these were sites of ritual significance, likely serving as burial chambers and communal gathering spaces. Yet the stones themselves seem to tell a story beyond the remains found within. Their careful orientation and spacing hint at knowledge of geometry, astronomy, or symbolic practice. Some dolmens are aligned along axes that correspond to the sun's movements at solstices and equinoxes, though the precision and intent remain subjects of debate. Could these stones have been used to track celestial cycles, or were they markers of sacred landscape, invisible to all but the initiated? Legends have grown around the Wéris Megaliths over centuries. Folklore tells of giants and otherworldly beings shaping the stones, a common narrative in many cultures seeking to explain monuments beyond the comprehension of ordinary people. These stories, while not evidence in themselves, underscore the awe these stones have inspired for generations. They are not merely remnants of the past, they are living presences in the imagination, capable of invoking wonder and speculation. Yet, even beyond legend, there are subtler, more intriguing mysteries. The construction methods remain largely theoretical. Scholars have proposed a combination of wooden rollers, ropes, and earthen ramps, but the exact techniques are lost to time. The precision of the stone placement, the careful leveling, and the alignment along specific axes suggest knowledge and planning that challenges assumptions about Neolithic capabilities. Were these techniques learned over generations, refined through trial and error, or did they arise from a level of understanding that we still struggle to define? Moreover, the Wéris megaliths exist within a broader landscape of megalithic culture that spans Europe, from the passage tombs of Ireland to the stone circles of Brittany and the dolmens of the Iberian Peninsula. Yet each site has its distinct character. Wéris stands out for its combination of dolmens and menhirs, its scattered yet coherent arrangement, and its relatively small but remarkably preserved stones. What prompted these choices? Were the stones markers of social identity, territorial boundaries, spiritual beliefs, or a combination of all three? And why do some stones appear isolated, while others form clusters that suggest communal or ritual functions? Some researchers have ventured into more speculative territory. A few have suggested that the alignments encode astronomical or calendrical information, perhaps used to guide agricultural activity or ceremonial events. Others wonder if the stones were intended to interact with the landscape in ways we cannot fully perceive today, creating acoustic effects, casting shadows along precise lines, or framing distant hills or waterways that held particular significance. While such ideas cannot be verified with certainty, they remind us that prehistoric monuments often served multiple functions, practical and symbolic, visible and hidden. Visiting Wéris today, the effect is immediate and almost tactile. Walking among the standing stones, running one's hand along weathered surfaces, feeling the rough weight of the massive slabs, it becomes clear that these structures were designed to impress, to endure, and perhaps to communicate something essential about the world as understood by those who built them. There is a rhythm to the placement of each stone, a dialogue between earth and sky, between monument and meadow. And yet, for all their deliberate construction, their true meaning remains elusive, a secret that time has chosen to keep. The Wéris megaliths, like Creevykeel and the Dwarfie Stane, invite reflection. They force us to consider not only what humans were capable of thousands of years ago, but also how much of that capability and that knowledge has been lost. They provoke questions about intention, symbolism, and the relationship between people and landscape. Were these stones sacred markers of the dead, calendrical instruments guiding the living, or expressions of a world view that is fundamentally different from our own, one that we can only glimpse in fragments and shadows? As we stand among the stones, feeling the quiet weight of centuries pressing down, the unanswered questions linger. The Wéris megaliths remind us that not all knowledge is written, not all history is recorded. Some truths are held in stone, in alignment, in form and space, waiting for the patient observer to uncover them, or perhaps to accept that some mysteries are meant to endure. And so, the stones remain, silent yet compelling, challenging us to look, to wonder, and to imagine what the builders of Wéris knew, and what they hoped to leave behind for a future they could never see. Leaving behind the open meadows and upright stones of Wéris, our journey carries us southward, across the continent and into the heart of the Mediterranean to the sun-drenched island of Malta. Here, amid the terraced hills and fertile valleys, stands one of the oldest and most enigmatic remnants of human ingenuity in Europe, Tal-Qadi Temple. Even today, its stones exude a quiet power, their surfaces warmed by centuries of sunlight, yet still shadowed by a mystery that has persisted for over 5 millennia. The site seems to radiate intention. Every slab, every carved recess, every carefully shaped megalith appears deliberate, as though echoing rituals that we can no longer fully grasp. Approaching Tal-Qadi, the first impression is one of scale and precision. Unlike the sprawling megalithic fields of Wéris, Tal-Qadi is compact, yet intricate. Its megaliths form a cloverleaf of interconnected chambers, a layout that is both elegant and perplexing. The central space, roughly circular, is framed by massive upright stones and smaller interior blocks that create an almost labyrinthine interior. Sunlight filters through the gaps, casting fleeting shadows that trace patterns across the limestone floor. It is a space that feels alive, as if it were designed to interact with its environment, the movement of the sun, and perhaps the observer themselves. Archaeologists date Tal-Qadi to the late Neolithic, around 3,600 to 2,500 BCE, placing it among the extraordinary temple complexes of Malta, including Menorca, Hagar-Chim, and Tarxian. Excavations have revealed carefully carved altars, offering pits and traces of ritual activity. Animal bones, pottery fragments, and ceremonial tools hint at a society deeply invested in the sacred, where temples functioned as both spiritual centers and social hubs. Yet, even with this wealth of information, fundamental questions persist. How did the builders achieve such precise stone carving without metal tools? Why choose this particular arrangement of chambers, and what dictated the size and orientation of each block? The temple's design itself invites speculation. Tal-Qadi's cloverleaf plan, with chambers radiating from a central space, appears symbolic rather than purely functional. Some scholars suggest that this layout reflects a cosmological or spiritual worldview, a tangible expression of belief encoded in stone. Others point to possible astronomical alignments. Certain chambers and openings may have been oriented toward solstices, equinoxes, or specific celestial events. If this is so, the builders were not merely constructing a place of worship. They were mapping the heavens onto the earth. How much of this knowledge has been lost, and how much remains hidden in the subtle geometry of the stones? Tal-Qadi also presents a quieter, more intimate mystery. Many of the chambers are low and enclosed, almost claustrophobic, while others are open and inviting. What guided these choices? Were they designed to separate initiates from the general public, to create thresholds between ordinary life and the sacred, or to manipulate light and sound in ritual performance? Some researchers have suggested that the temple's architecture may have produced acoustic effects, amplifying chants or incantations in ways that are difficult to reproduce today. Such possibilities hint at a sophisticated understanding of both space and perception, far beyond what one might expect from a Neolithic community. Local folklore adds another layer to Tal-Qadi's enigma. Tales speak of priests and seers who could communicate with unseen forces, of offerings made to deities whose names are now forgotten. These stories, passed down over generations, blur the line between historical record and cultural memory. They remind us that such temples were not merely functional structures. They were centers of meaning, places where the human and the divine may have intersected. Even the practical aspects of Tal-Qadi's construction raise questions. The stones are massive, some weighing several tons, yet evidence suggests they were quarried nearby and transported with remarkable efficiency. The precision with which the blocks fit together, particularly in the interior chambers, is astonishing. In some places, tiny channels and grooves indicate deliberate shaping, almost like a language carved in limestone. What tools, techniques, and knowledge made this possible, and why has that expertise vanished from the historical record? Standing among the ruins today, one cannot help but feel a profound sense of time layered upon itself. The temple is silent, yet it resonates with human intention, ritual, and memory. Every worn surface, every carved indentation seems to ask questions. Who walked here before us? What ceremonies unfolded in these chambers? And what knowledge, lost to the ages, shaped the hands that lifted these stones and positioned them with such care? Tal-Qadi, like the Wéris Megaliths, Creevykeel, and the Dwarfie Stane, challenges our assumptions about prehistoric societies. It reminds us that early humans were not merely surviving. They were thinking, observing, and creating in ways that intertwined the spiritual, the social, and the cosmic. The temple compels us to consider the depth of their understanding and the intent behind their choices. Were these sacred spaces primarily for the dead, the living, or both? Were the chambers and courts practical, symbolic, or deliberately enigmatic? As the sun begins to dip behind the Maltese hills, the shadows lengthen across Tal-Qadi's stones, and the air seems to hum with the weight of centuries. The answers we seek remain elusive, hidden in geometry, in orientation, in ritual practices that we can only glimpse through fragmentary evidence. And yet, there is a clarity in the mystery itself. These temples endure not merely as ruins, but as invitations to observe, to question, and to imagine what knowledge and intent lie etched in stone, waiting to be understood by those patient enough to look and wonder. Leaving behind the sun-baked stones and intricate chambers of Tal-Qadi Temple, our journey carries us west across the Mediterranean to the quiet, rugged landscapes of Menorca, one of Spain's Balearic Islands. Here, perched atop limestone terraces overlooking rolling hills and the distant shimmer of the sea, stand some of the most mysterious monuments of the Western Mediterranean, the Taulas. Their presence is striking both in scale and simplicity, yet imbued with an aura that hints at complex rituals and knowledge now largely lost. The Taulas, with their massive vertical supports crowned by horizontal lintels, resemble immense stone T-shaped tables, enigmatic and immovable, yet quietly commanding the attention of anyone who approaches. The first impression of a Taula is one of stark elegance. Unlike the sprawling layouts of Tal-Qadi, the Taulas are singular, isolated constructions, each composed of a vertical monolith topped with a perpendicular horizontal slab. The stones are massive, some reaching over 5 meters in height, and though weathered by millennia, they convey a sense of careful placement, as though the builders understood not just how to move these enormous blocks, but how to balance them with precision and intention. The surrounding landscape is equally deliberate. Many Taulas occupy elevated plateaus, their positions commanding expansive views, yet seemingly hidden from casual observation. Why these particular sites? What determined their placement, and how much did the landscape itself guide their design? Archaeological study dates the Taulas to roughly 1000 to 300 BCE, placing them within the Talaiotic culture of Menorca. Unlike Neolithic temples elsewhere, these structures appear post-Neolithic, associated with a more complex, hierarchical society capable of large-scale organization and monumental construction. Excavations in and around Taulas have uncovered pottery fragments, stone tools, and animal remains, indicating that these sites were centers of ritual activity. Yet, unlike Tal-Qadi or the Wéris Megaliths, there is no clear evidence of burial within the Taulas themselves, leaving their primary function open to interpretation. Were they ceremonial altars, astronomical markers, or spaces for communal gatherings? Or did they serve purposes that we cannot yet imagine? The Taula's design is deceptively simple, yet it carries layers of intrigue. Some researchers suggest that the T-shape may have symbolic meaning, possibly representing a deity, a cosmic axis, or a stylized table for offerings. Others note that the elevated location and open form might have allowed for astronomical observation, tracking sun, moon, or stellar movements in ritual contexts. If this is so, then the builders were not merely creating monumental architecture. They were encoding knowledge, embedding their understanding of time, space, and the heavens into the landscape itself. And yet, the lack of written records leaves us guessing. How much of this knowledge has been lost, buried in ritual and practice, leaving only the stones to hint at its former significance? The methods of construction, too, remain enigmatic. The vertical monoliths were quarried, transported, and balanced with apparent ease, yet the exact techniques remain speculative. Some theories suggest wooden sledges, ropes, and inclined planes, while others propose more subtle methods, relying on communal coordination and intimate knowledge of leverage and balance. Whatever the technique, the sheer weight and stability of the stones, some weighing several tons, demonstrates a level of engineering sophistication that continues to impress archaeologists today. How did these island communities, without the wheel or advanced metal tools, manipulate such massive blocks with precision? And why choose this form, so stark and geometric, instead of the more organic or curvilinear shapes seen in contemporaneous Mediterranean structures? Equally compelling is the cultural context of the Taulas. They appear to have been focal points for ritual and communal life, yet their isolated, almost contemplative placement suggests a spiritual or symbolic significance beyond the practical. Folklore surrounding the sites speaks of sacred rites, secret gatherings, and connections to celestial forces. Some Taulas align with distant mountain peaks or specific sightlines, suggesting a deliberate interaction with the surrounding terrain. Were these stones intended to frame the sky, to act as markers of sacred time, or to channel unseen energies? And if so, how much of this purpose has been obscured by centuries of change and erosion? Walking among the Taulas today, one is struck by a sense of deliberate emptiness. Unlike the enclosed chambers of Tal-Qadi or the intricate dolmens of Wéris, the Taulas invite observation, reflection, and interpretation. Their simplicity is deceptive. The stones provoke questions rather than provide answers. Each vertical monolith, crowned with its horizontal slab, seems to act as a silent interlocutor between human and cosmos, offering only what we are prepared to perceive. There is a rhythm to their placement, a dialogue between earth, stone, and sky that is subtle yet unmistakable, suggesting that the builders understood not only the physical properties of their materials, but the psychological and spiritual impact of space itself. The mystery of the Taulas persists precisely because the evidence is so sparse, yet so deliberate. Unlike tombs or habitation sites, these monuments provide few clues in the form of artifacts or inscriptions. What survives is stone, sky, and the carefully chosen landscape itself. Yet within that simplicity lies an enduring power. It challenges us to think about knowledge in ways that are not measured by written records or conventional tools. Were these stones markers of divine presence, instruments of ritual timekeeping, or symbols of social hierarchy? Perhaps they were all of these things, simultaneously practical and symbolic, visible and ineffable. As the sun dips toward the horizon and casts long shadows across the limestone plateaus, the Taulas stand as silent witnesses to the ambitions, beliefs, and knowledge of a people whose full story remains beyond our grasp. Their T-shaped forms, balancing impossibly yet enduring, invite us to pause and reflect on the ingenuity of the past and the questions that endure. What did the builders of Menorca see when they looked upon the horizon? What truths were encoded in stone, and what has been lost to time? In their silence, the Taulas compel us to look closer, wonder more deeply, and acknowledge that some mysteries are not meant to be solved but experienced, patiently and reverently, across the span of centuries. Leaving the windswept cliffs and monumental Taulas of Menorca behind, our journey continues southward across the Mediterranean to the rugged landscapes of Sardinia, Italy. Here, nestled among rolling hills, dense scrub, and the faint scent of wild herbs, rises Monte Baranta, a site of both striking natural beauty and enduring enigma. At first glance, the mountain appears ordinary, a limestone outcrop weathered over millennia, its slopes dotted with scrub oak and scattered boulders. Yet upon closer inspection, it reveals a network of structures carved directly into stone, enigmatic formations that suggest purpose and design far beyond the casual hand of nature. Monte Baranta is dominated by a series of terraces, steps, and chambers hewn from solid rock, forming spaces that are at once intimate and monumental. Shallow depressions, carefully shaped channels, and roughly aligned walls hint at deliberate planning. Some chambers are roofed with massive stones, others open to the sky, their interiors echoing with the faintest sounds of wind or footsteps. The overall layout is irregular, almost labyrinthine, yet there is a rhythm to the placement of each stone and hollow, suggesting that the builders were guided by both practical and symbolic considerations. Why was this site chosen, perched atop a hill that rises sharply above the surrounding plains? What forces, spiritual, astronomical, or social, dictated the arrangement of stone and space? Archaeologists classify Monte Baranta as part of the broader Sardinian megalithic tradition, which includes the well-known Nuraghe, sacred wells, and complex tombs of the Bronze Age. Radiocarbon dating of nearby material suggests that some of the constructions may date back as far as 1500 to 1200 BCE, yet the precise chronology remains difficult to determine due to extensive erosion and later human activity. Unlike many other Sardinian sites, Monte Baranta's features do not neatly fit into recognized categories. The terraces resemble defensive or ritual platforms, yet they are too narrow and uneven to serve purely military purposes. The chambers could be tombs, yet no human remains have been conclusively identified. What, then, was the intended function of this complex, and how did it relate to the communities that inhabited the island? The landscape itself adds to the mystery. Monte Baranta's elevation provides commanding views of the surrounding valleys, rivers, and distant coastlines. Some researchers propose that the terraces were oriented to align with the sun at solstices or equinoxes, creating a symbolic map of celestial events on the ground. Others note that certain depressions may have been used for water collection, ritual offerings, or even astronomical observation. The combination of practical, ceremonial, and symbolic possibilities creates a puzzle that resists easy categorization. Could these constructions have served multiple functions simultaneously, merging daily life with ritual practice in ways we are only beginning to understand? Local legends have long surrounded Monte Baranta. Folklore speaks of hidden treasures, sacred rites, and mysterious lights dancing across the hilltops at dawn and dusk. Some tales suggest that the mountain itself was a place of communion with the divine, where priests or elders might interpret celestial signals or perform rituals of immense significance. While such stories are difficult to verify, they underscore the sense of purpose and reverence that must have surrounded the site, reinforcing the idea that Monte Baranta was more than a settlement or tomb. It was a center of human engagement with something larger than the individual. Equally puzzling are the methods by which the stone was shaped and arranged. The terraces and chambers are cut from solid limestone with remarkable precision, yet there is no evidence of metal tools capable of producing such clean lines in the earliest phases of construction. Some stones weigh several tons, and their transport, placement, and leveling would have required sophisticated planning, coordination, and knowledge of leverage. How did these communities achieve such feats with the technology available to them? Was there a body of knowledge, now lost, guiding the construction of Monte Baranta, a tradition passed down through generations? Walking among the terraces today, one senses both intimacy and scale. The chambers feel like deliberate enclosures, spaces that might have been used for quiet reflection, ritual performance, or observation of the surrounding terrain. Shadows cast by the low sun accentuate the carved edges of the stones, and the wind seems to carry whispers from centuries past. It is a landscape that invites contemplation, urging visitors to consider not just the structures themselves, but the mindset and intentions of the people who created them. Monte Baranta's mystery is compounded by its isolation. Unlike the clustered Nuraghe or coastal temples, this site stands largely alone, elevated above other settlements. Why build here, and what did the builders hope to see, know, or communicate? Was the mountain itself considered sacred, its natural prominence a canvas upon which human activity and celestial observation were inscribed? Or was it intended to be a marker of social or political power, a visible symbol of control over the surrounding lands? Each interpretation offers tantalizing possibilities, yet none provides definitive answers. As the sun begins to dip behind the distant hills, the terraces and chambers of Monte Baranta are bathed in golden light. The stones, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain, seem to exude both permanence and fragility. The site invites a profound question. What knowledge, beliefs, and practices shaped these constructions, and what truths have been lost to the erosion of time? Monte Baranta, like the Taulas of Menorca and the temples of Malta before it, reminds us that not all human achievement is fully understood, and that some mysteries persist not because they are hidden, but because they transcend our modern frameworks of explanation. The mountain endures, silent yet commanding, challenging us to look closer, to listen, and to wonder. In its terraces, its chambers, and its stone-carved contours, we glimpse a society that engaged with the world in ways both practical and symbolic, leaving behind clues that speak across millennia. And yet, for all that survives, the full story remains just out of reach, inviting us to ponder what might still be hidden, waiting for patient eyes to uncover and patient minds to interpret. Leaving behind the sun-drenched terraces and carved chambers of Monte Baranta, our journey turns eastward once more, following the great arc of the Mediterranean to the banks of the Nile in southern Egypt. Here, amidst the fertile floodplains and shifting desert horizons, rises the temple of Kom Ombo, a monument of stone whose imposing presence has drawn travelers, worshippers, and scholars for millennia. From a distance, the temple dominates the landscape, its sandstone walls catching the glow of the rising sun, pylons and columns rising like sentinels over the Nile, reflecting in the calm waters below. Yet while its form is familiar to those who study Egypt's classical architecture, its design carries mysteries that have long defied complete explanation. Kom Ombo is unique among Egyptian temples in both purpose and structure. Unlike most temples dedicated to a single deity, it is a double sanctuary. One half honors Sobek, the crocodile god associated with strength and fertility, while the other is dedicated to Horus the Elder, god of the sky and kingship. The temple's symmetrical design mirrors this dual devotion, with duplicate courts, halls, and sanctuaries on either side of a central axis. The walls are covered with finely carved reliefs depicting pharaohs, priests, and gods, alongside intricate depictions of rituals, offerings, and sacred animals. And yet, for all its beauty and precision, the reasons behind certain features remain elusive. Why build a temple of such symmetry here, on this particular bend of the Nile? What significance did the surrounding landscape hold in the minds of its creators? Constructed during the Ptolemaic period, around 180 to 47 BCE, Kom Ombo is younger than Egypt's more famous temples at Karnak or Luxor, yet it incorporates traditions reaching deep into the past. Archaeologists note that the temple's foundations may sit atop earlier structures, suggesting a continuity of sacred use spanning centuries. Among the most striking features are the numerous depictions of surgical instruments and medical symbols etched into the walls, a rarity in Egyptian temples. These carvings have led some scholars to speculate that Kom Ombo functioned not only as a place of worship, but also as a center for healing, perhaps combining spiritual and practical knowledge in ways we are only beginning to understand. How much of this knowledge was intended for the initiated, and how much was meant to be preserved for posterity in stone? The Nile itself seems inseparable from the temple's design. Kom Ombo sits on an elevated terrace, its axis aligned roughly with the river's course, creating a mirror effect in the water that enhances its symmetry. Some researchers suggest that this placement reflects symbolic intention. The Nile, both life-giver and unpredictable force, becomes an integral part of the temple's ritual experience. Could the changing tides, seasonal floods, or reflections on the water have been incorporated into ceremonies, providing a living, dynamic element to worship? And if so, what understanding of natural rhythms guided the builders in selecting this precise site? Equally intriguing are the temple's artistic and architectural anomalies. Certain reliefs depict scenes that seem out of place within traditional Egyptian cosmology: crocodiles in ceremonial contexts, hybrid creatures, and symbolic hieroglyphs whose meaning has been debated for centuries. Scholars have proposed a range of interpretations, from local cult practices to esoteric rituals known only to priests. Yet none fully account for the deliberate repetition of motifs, the alignment of internal chambers, or the choice of symmetry in both sacred and practical spaces. What knowledge informed these decisions, and why is it only partially intelligible to us today? Even the construction methods invite reflection. The sandstone blocks were quarried, transported, and carved with remarkable skill, yet the precision of certain interior features, doorways, relief channels, and intricate niches suggests knowledge of geometry and proportion that rivals any contemporary Mediterranean culture. How did builders coordinate such large-scale work in an era without modern tools, and how did they maintain symmetry across two parallel sanctuaries dedicated to separate deities? What principles of mathematics, astronomy, or ritual guided these choices, and what has been lost in translation over the centuries? The temple's role in daily and ceremonial life adds yet another layer of intrigue. Reliefs depict processions, offerings, and sacrificial rites, yet the rhythm of these activities remains obscure. Were certain chambers reserved for priests alone, while others served the wider community? Did the dual dedication create simultaneous ceremonies, or were Sobek and Horus worshipped at different times? The evidence is fragmentary, leaving us to wonder whether the temple's design reflects a complex calendar of ritual, encoded in stone and spatial arrangement. Today, the Temple of Kom Ombo stands as a silent testament to human ambition and devotion. Walking among its columns, tracing the worn carvings of pharaohs and priests, one feels the weight of centuries pressing gently against the present. The symmetry, the subtle interaction with sunlight and water, the enigmatic depictions of animals and instruments, all speak of a culture deeply aware of both earthly and cosmic forces. And yet, for all that survives, the temple keeps its secrets. The full extent of its ritual, the precise meaning of its iconography, and the knowledge embedded in its construction remain tantalizingly out of reach. Kom Ombo, like Monte Baranta, the Taulas of Menorca, and the temples of Malta, reminds us that human beings have long sought to leave traces of understanding in the world, traces that endure long after their creators have vanished. It challenges us to reflect not only on what was achieved, but on what remains hidden. Knowledge encoded in stone, in symmetry, in alignment with river and sky, waiting to be perceived by those willing to look carefully, patiently, and thoughtfully. As the sun dips low over the Nile and the temple casts its twin shadows upon the water, we are left with a simple yet profound question. What did the builders of Kom Ombo know about the world, and what truths have been carried silently through the stone for centuries, waiting for those who might finally decipher them? The mystery endures, quiet and compelling, inviting us to linger, to observe, and to wonder. Leaving behind the sandstone pylons and symmetrical sanctuaries of Kom Ombo, our journey carries us across continents and oceans to the arid valleys of northern Peru. Here, along the Moche River near the modern city of Trujillo, rises a monument of extraordinary scale and enigmatic purpose, the Huaca del Sol. Towering over the surrounding desert landscape, this immense adobe pyramid asserts itself with a quiet, almost solemn authority. From a distance, its massive walls appear uniform and monolithic, yet closer observation reveals subtle layers, long lines, and intricate impressions, evidence of countless bricks, each placed with care by hands long vanished. Its sheer size, and the precision with which it was built, immediately raises questions. What drove its construction, and what knowledge guided its builders? The Huaca del Sol was the ceremonial and administrative heart of the Moche civilization, which flourished along the northern Peruvian coast between roughly 100 and 800 CE. Constructed almost entirely from adobe bricks, the pyramid reaches an original estimated height of 50 meters, though centuries of erosion and looting have reduced it somewhat. It is composed of millions of sun-dried bricks, arranged in interlocking patterns designed to withstand earthquakes and time itself. Walking along the terraces, one is struck not only by the scale of the construction, but by the rhythmic, almost architectural elegance of each layer. How did the Moche achieve such structural sophistication without the use of stone, mortar, or the wheel? How was labor organized to raise walls of such size with such consistency? And why was this particular site chosen along the river valley? Archaeologists have uncovered tantalizing evidence of the pyramid's purpose. Huaca del Sol appears to have functioned as both a religious center and a seat of political power. Burial sites of elites, ceremonial spaces, and storerooms for offerings have been identified within and around its terraces. Painted murals and reliefs, though now fragmentary, once depicted deities, warriors, and ritual scenes, conveying a complex narrative of power, religion, and cosmology. Yet even with this evidence, much remains unclear. What precise ceremonies took place atop the pyramid? How did its function evolve over centuries? And what knowledge of astronomy, hydrology, or ritual informed its construction? The pyramid's location is itself a mystery. Positioned on the desert's edge, yet close to fertile river plains, Huaca del Sol seems intentionally chosen to command both natural and human landscapes. Some researchers suggest its height and orientation may have allowed observation of celestial events, aligning sun and shadow with key dates in the Moche calendar. Others propose that it was a visual assertion of authority, a structure designed to impress the living as much as to honor the dead. And yet, the combination of practical, ceremonial, and symbolic considerations leaves us wondering how much of this knowledge was technical and how much spiritual, encoded in every brick and every terrace. Even more intriguing is the pyramid's construction method. The moche used adobe bricks molded with care, then dried under the harsh sun, creating a material both lightweight and durable. Some bricks bear maker's marks, signatures or symbols, perhaps identifying workshops, craftspeople, or ritual significance. The interlocking patterns of the walls suggest an understanding of structural reinforcement far beyond simple stacking. How was this knowledge developed, preserved, and transmitted across generations? What social organization and logistical expertise allowed a civilization to erect such an enormous structure in an environment both harsh and unpredictable? Local legends add yet another dimension to Huaca del Sol's mystery. Stories speak of hidden tunnels, secret chambers, and treasures buried within the pyramid. While many of these claims are impossible to verify, they underscore the human fascination with monumental architecture and the secrets it might conceal. The repeated looting of the site over centuries has destroyed much of its surface. Yet the sheer volume of construction still speaks to a society that prioritized monumental expression of belief, power, and knowledge. Could there be chambers still undiscovered, carrying insights into moche society, religion, or technology that modern archaeology has yet to reveal? Walking along the terraces today, one senses both grandeur and intimacy. The adobe walls, weathered and cracked by centuries of sun, wind, and rain, retain the faint impressions of the hands that built them. The pyramid seems to speak not in words, but in scale, pattern, and endurance. It is both a physical testament to human ingenuity and a psychological monument to aspiration. The desire to leave a lasting mark on the world, to encode knowledge, authority, and belief into enduring material form. And yet, for all its apparent permanence, the full story of Huaca del Sol remains just out of reach. The mystery extends beyond construction. Scholars debate the relationship between Huaca del Sol and its companion pyramid, Huaca de la Luna, located just across the valley. Were these structures complementary ceremonial centers, reflecting different aspects of moche cosmology? Were they used sequentially or simultaneously in rituals? And what does their alignment and proximity tell us about moche understanding of landscape, society, and celestial cycles? Each question invites reflection on knowledge long lost, and on the deliberate choices of a civilization that sought to inscribe meaning into the earth itself. As the sun begins to dip toward the Andean horizon, casting long shadows across the adobe terraces, Huaca del Sol radiates both presence and mystery. It reminds us, as the Taulas of Menorca and the temples of Malta once did, that human beings have always sought to communicate across time, to record power, belief, and observation in enduring form. And yet, as we gaze upon its worn surfaces and towering walls, we are confronted by the profound realization that some knowledge may remain inaccessible, encoded in mud, stone, and ritual, waiting for patient eyes to discern its patterns. Huaca del Sol challenges us to ask the same questions that have persisted for centuries. What did the moche know about their world, their cosmos, and themselves? What secrets have been preserved within the millions of bricks that form this monumental pyramid? And, as with all great mysteries of the ancient world, we are left with the invitation to look closer, wonder more deeply, and consider that some truths may endure silently, waiting for those who are willing to observe, reflect, and imagine. Leaving the sun-baked adobe terraces of Huaca del Sol behind, our journey takes us across the Indian Ocean to the verdant hills and rocky outcrops of southern India. Here, perched atop a quiet rise near the village of Moryar Gudda in Karnataka, stands a monument of stone whose age and purpose continue to puzzle archaeologists and travelers alike. The dolmen is at once simple and profound, a massive horizontal capstone balanced precariously upon upright pillars, forming a chamber just large enough to step inside, Surrounded by scrub, scattered boulders, and the distant hum of rural life, the dolmen seems almost deliberately isolated, inviting reflection and contemplation. What compelled its builders to place it here, in this particular landscape, and what knowledge guided their hands in lifting such enormous stones? The Moryar Gudda dolmen belongs to the broader tradition of megalithic constructions in southern India, which date from roughly 1000 BCE to the early centuries CE. Across the region, thousands of such structures mark hilltops, valleys, and river terraces, yet each site has its own character. At Moryar Gudda, the stones are remarkable not just for their weight and scale, but for their precision. The capstone rests evenly on the supporting pillars, balanced so delicately that centuries of wind, rain, and seismic activity have not toppled it. How did the builders achieve such stability without advanced tools or machinery? What principles of leverage, geometry, or communal coordination guided their construction? The purpose of the dolmen, like many megaliths worldwide, is still debated. Archaeologists suggest that these chambers were used primarily for burial, ritual offerings, or ancestor worship. Excavations in nearby sites have uncovered human remains, pottery shards, and stone implements, indicating that these structures were integral to both spiritual and social life. Yet the Moryar Gudda dolmen presents a puzzle. No definitive remains have been found within, leaving its function open to interpretation. Was it a tomb, a ceremonial space, or something else entirely? Could it have served as a site for rites of passage, astronomical observation, or even symbolic communication across the landscape? The setting itself adds layers of intrigue. Moryar Gudda rises above the surrounding plains, offering commanding views of distant hills and valleys. Some researchers propose that the dolmen, like many megalithic sites, may have been deliberately positioned to align with celestial events, sunrises, solstices, or equinoxes. Others note the placement in relation to water sources or natural land formations, suggesting that the builders understood the environment in ways that balanced practicality with ritual intent. Yet the full logic behind its location remains elusive, lost in the silence of millennia. The construction method continues to fascinate. The capstone is immense, requiring not only strength but knowledge of leverage, balance, and teamwork. Oral traditions and local folklore speak of supernatural aid, giants, or divine intervention, but while we may dismiss such tales as metaphorical, they reveal the awe these structures have inspired across generations. Could the builders have relied on techniques now forgotten, or was there a communal knowledge of physics and stonecraft that simply vanished with the passage of time? How were these communities organized, and what social or spiritual priorities drove them to invest such energy in these seemingly isolated monuments? Beyond practical and ritual considerations, there is an aesthetic dimension to Moryar Gudda that cannot be ignored. The dolmen's proportions, the tension between vertical pillars and horizontal capstone, and its placement on the hilltop create a striking visual harmony. Standing beneath the capstone, one senses the careful balance between human ingenuity and natural forces, gravity, stone density, and the contours of the landscape itself. The space within feels intentionally framed, an intimate chamber that may have been designed for quiet reflection, ritual performance, or communion with ancestors. What thoughts and beliefs shaped this environment, and what emotions did the builders intend to evoke in those who entered it? Some scholars have suggested more speculative possibilities. Could the dolmen have served as a site for observing celestial patterns, with the capstone and pillars acting as markers of time or seasonal change? Might it have been a focal point for trade or social gatherings, linking disparate communities through shared ritual practices? Or could the structure have encoded spiritual or cosmological concepts that we can only glimpse through its careful geometry and placement? Each of these possibilities underscores the sophistication of megalithic cultures, challenging assumptions about prehistoric knowledge and social organization. Today, Moryar Gudda dolmen stands quietly, its stones weathered but unyielding. The air is filled with the sound of distant wind and birdsong, and the surrounding hills cast long shadows over the stone chamber as the sun rises and sets. Walking around it, tracing the lines of the capstone and pillars, one is struck by a sense of continuity. The dolmen connects the present observer to generations long gone, a tangible record of human aspiration, skill, and perhaps reverence. Its presence is both grounding and unsettling, reminding us that some human achievements, while visible, retain an inherent mystery. Like the pyramids of Peru, the temples of Egypt, and the megalithic monuments of Europe, Moryar Gudda dolmen compels reflection on what has been lost, preserved, or deliberately hidden in plain sight. It raises questions about knowledge, ritual, and the relationship between human beings and their environment, questions we may never fully answer. As we stand beneath the massive capstone, feeling its silent weight and imagining the hands that lifted it into place, we are reminded that some mysteries persist not because they are obscure, but because they transcend our modern frameworks of understanding. Moryar Gudda dolmen, like so many ancient monuments across the world, invites us to pause, to observe, and to wonder. What knowledge guided its construction? What rituals once took place here? And what beliefs did they reflect? And perhaps most compellingly, what remains hidden in plain sight, waiting for patient eyes to uncover the secrets encoded in stone, landscape, and time? Leaving behind the sun-warmed stones of Moryar Gudda, our journey returns to the rolling landscapes of northern Europe, where ancient hands left enduring marks upon the land. In the quiet fields near Avebury, England, rises a monument of extraordinary scale and subtle power, the West Kennet Long Barrow. From a distance, it appears as a gentle, elongated rise of earth, its grassy surface blending almost seamlessly with the surrounding countryside. Yet, beneath this seemingly natural mound lies a carefully constructed chambered tomb, a structure that has endured for over 5 millennia, holding within it traces of lives, rituals, and knowledge now largely lost to time. Even in its modest exterior, the barrow exudes an aura of intentionality, an invitation to step closer, to question, to imagine. West Kennet Long Barrow is among the largest and most well-preserved Neolithic chambered tombs in Britain, stretching over 100 meters in length and flanked by long ditches whose purpose continues to puzzle researchers. Constructed around 3650 BCE, its builders used massive sarsen stones to create a central chamber, covered and concealed by layers of earth and smaller stones. The entrance, deliberately narrow and low, forces the visitor to stoop as they enter, creating a transition from the open air to a confined, sacred interior. What motivated this design? Was it intended to inspire awe, humility, or reverence? Or was it a practical solution to protect the contents within from the elements and from human interference? Archaeological studies have revealed that the chamber contained multiple burials, often layered and sometimes accompanied by grave goods, flint tools, pottery fragments, and personal ornaments. Carbon dating suggests that these burials took place over centuries, indicating that West Kennet was not a one-time construction but a living monument, continually revisited and reused by successive generations. How did its significance evolve over time? Did the people who added to the tomb maintain a collective memory of its original purpose, or did its meaning shift with each new burial and ritual? The barrow's orientation and location suggest deliberate attention to landscape and sky. Its long axis runs roughly east to west, a choice that has prompted speculation about alignment with the rising and setting sun, perhaps marking solstices or seasonal cycles. Could these alignments have been purely symbolic, representing cycles of life and death, or were they also practical, tied to agricultural or ritual calendars? Some researchers even suggest that the positioning of the barrow in relation to nearby megaliths and henges in the Avebury complex reflects a broader network of sacred spaces, a prehistoric map of ritual and memory inscribed upon the land itself. The construction of West Kennet Long Barrow presents its own enduring puzzle. The sarsen stones used in the chamber were quarried and transported with remarkable care, some from distances of several kilometers. Moving and positioning these stones would have required precise coordination, strength, and engineering knowledge. How did Neolithic communities, without advanced machinery, manage to move such massive blocks with such accuracy? Were there techniques, now lost, for levering, rolling, or dragging these stones that have yet to be fully understood? And what social organization made it possible to marshal the manpower and resources for a project of this scale? Even more enigmatic are the subtle details within the chamber. Some stones bear natural hollows or depressions, and others appear deliberately shaped or positioned, possibly to influence acoustics, light, or ritual practice. Stepping inside, one can sense the difference between the interior and the surrounding landscape. The barrow becomes a space apart, where sound, shadow, and perspective shift, perhaps intentionally designed to evoke contemplation or spiritual experience. Were these spaces intended for the living, as places of ceremony? Or were they solely a domain of the dead? Could the layout have encoded knowledge about the cosmos, the human body, or the cycle of life in ways that are no longer legible to us? West Kennet Long Barrow is part of a broader tradition of long barrows across Britain and Northern Europe, yet each structure possesses its own character. The deliberate combination of earth, stone, and space, the repeated reuse of the tomb, and the careful orientation within the landscape suggest that these monuments were as much about memory and symbolism as they were about burial. Were they communal statements of lineage and identity, sacred markers of territory, or perhaps even astronomical instruments? Or were they deliberately enigmatic, designed to convey authority and mystery in ways that transcended words? Walking along the grassy ridge today, one is struck by a sense of continuity. The barrow's long silhouette rises gently against the horizon, connecting the observer to thousands of years of human thought, ritual, and labor. Its weathered stones and eroded earth invite reflection, encouraging visitors to consider the minds and hands that shaped them. And yet, despite centuries of study, much remains unknown. The full scope of ceremonies performed here, the significance of its alignments, and the social and spiritual knowledge encoded in its construction all remain tantalizingly elusive. West Kennet Long Barrow, like Moryar Gudda, Huaca del Sol, and the temples of Kom Ombo, reminds us that human beings have long sought to leave enduring marks upon the landscape. Monuments designed not merely to survive, but to communicate. Its enduring presence invites us to ask questions about life, death, and the human need to structure space and memory. What knowledge guided the construction of this long barrow, and what truths have been lost in the millennia since? And perhaps most compellingly, what might remain hidden within its stones and earth, waiting for patient observation and imagination to uncover? In its quiet majesty, West Kennet Long Barrow speaks across time, a silent testament to the ingenuity, belief, and determination of the people who built it. And as we stand upon its grassy ridge, gazing across the surrounding countryside, we are left with the enduring invitation of all great monuments of the ancient world to look closer, wonder more deeply, and accept that some mysteries, like the passage of time itself, may never be fully resolved. Leaving the gentle rise of West Kennet Long Barrow behind, our journey carries us across the English Channel to the rugged, wind-swept coast of Brittany, France. Here, on a small, rocky island in the Gulf of Morbihan, sits one of the most extraordinary and enigmatic Neolithic monuments in Europe, the Gavrinis Passage Tomb. From afar, the island appears unassuming, a modest outcrop surrounded by tidal waters, yet beneath its surface lies a labyrinth of stone, a burial chamber whose artistry, complexity, and mystery have captivated scholars and visitors for centuries. Approaching the tomb, one cannot help but feel the weight of its history. Over 5,000 years of human endeavor and ritual etched into stone, yet leaving questions that remain unanswered. Gavrinis is best known for its passage, a narrow corridor leading to a central chamber, entirely covered by a cairn of carefully placed stones. The walls of the passage are decorated with more than 2,500 intricately carved symbols, spirals, chevrons, zigzags, and other geometric patterns, each carved deeply into the granite slabs. The carvings are mesmerizing in their precision, as if every line and curve was intended to communicate knowledge or meaning beyond our comprehension. What do these symbols represent? Are they purely decorative, ritualistic, or do they encode cosmological, spiritual, or astronomical knowledge? And why did the builders invest such effort in decorating a space that was largely hidden from view, concealed beneath tons of stone? Archaeological evidence suggests that Gavrinis was constructed around 3,500 BCE, placing it firmly within the European Neolithic period, alongside other passage tombs such as Newgrange in Ireland and West Kennet in England. Yet Gavrinis is distinguished by the density and sophistication of its carvings, as well as by the care with which its massive stones were shaped, transported, and positioned. Each slab had to be raised, fitted precisely, and aligned with the corridor's axis, all without the use of metal tools. How did these communities achieve such engineering feats, and what motivated them to invest so much labor in creating a space whose interior would remain largely inaccessible to most? The tomb's layout itself raises questions. The passage leads to a central chamber roughly 6 meters in diameter, roofed by enormous corbelled stones and surrounded by a ring of standing stones. The structure is both functional and symbolic, designed to house burials, yet also to guide movement, light, and perspective in ways that may have had ritual significance. Some researchers suggest that the passage may have been aligned to capture sunlight at specific times of the year, illuminating carvings in patterns tied to the solstice or other celestial events. Could this have been a way of connecting the living and the dead, the earth and the sky? And if so, what knowledge of astronomy and ritual informed its construction? The carvings themselves are a puzzle. Spirals, waves, and geometric motifs repeat across walls and ceiling, yet there is no definitive key to their meaning. Some scholars interpret them as symbolic representations of water, life cycles, or spiritual journeys. Others suggest that they may have functioned as a form of proto-writing, encoding oral traditions or communal knowledge in visual form. The repetition and symmetry in the patterns suggest intention and meaning, yet we cannot fully decipher it. Were these symbols meant to guide the deceased, instruct the living, or serve as a record for posterity? Or might their purpose have been deliberately enigmatic, meant to evoke awe and reverence rather than convey literal information? The sheer logistics of construction add to the mystery. The granite slabs used to build Gavrinis were quarried from local sources, but each required careful shaping, transport, and placement. Some weigh several tons, yet they were arranged with remarkable precision, creating corridors and chambers that have endured for millennia. How did Neolithic people move these stones without metal tools or advanced machinery? What techniques, knowledge, and communal organization made this possible? And why choose such a small, isolated island for such a monumental effort, when the surrounding mainland offered easier access? Walking through the passage today, the experience is both intimate and overwhelming. The walls seem to close in, yet the carvings draw the eye upward and inward, creating a rhythm of shadow, light, and form that is almost hypnotic. The space feels deliberately designed to alter perception, to heighten awareness, evoke reflection, or facilitate ritual. One can imagine the builders performing ceremonies here, moving through the passage in processions, perhaps guided by light and shadow, sound and stone. Yet the specifics of these rituals remain elusive, leaving the imagination to bridge the gap between evidence and interpretation. Gavrinis' passage tomb also challenges our understanding of Neolithic society. Its construction required not only skill but social coordination, suggesting a community with shared purpose, beliefs, and organizational capacity. What motivated such a society to channel so much effort into a monument whose primary function, its carvings and passage, remained hidden beneath stone and earth? Was this expression of labor and artistry meant to communicate across generations, or to connect the living with ancestors and deities in ways we can only speculate? As the Atlantic winds sweep across the small island and sunlight shifts across the carved walls, Gavrinis stands as both a tomb and a testament, a record of ingenuity, devotion, and perhaps knowledge lost to time. Like West Kennet Long Barrow, Moryar Gudda Dolmen, and Huaca del Sol before it, Gavrinis reminds us that human beings have long sought to leave marks that endure across centuries, inscriptions that speak in silence, and spaces that challenge perception and understanding. And yet, for all its beauty, precision, and apparent purpose, Gavrinis keeps its secrets. What knowledge guided the placement of every stone, the alignment of every slab, the repetition of every spiral? What rituals unfolded within its dark corridors, and what truths were encoded in its carvings that we cannot yet read? The passage tomb remains a silent interlocutor between past and present, inviting us to linger, observe, and wonder at the depth of human ingenuity and mystery that has endured for over 5,000 years. Leaving the intricately carved walls of Gavrinis behind, our journey once again turns south across the Mediterranean, toward the sun-washed islands of Malta. Here, in the quiet countryside near Gebie on the island of Gozo, rise the ancient remains of the Skorba Temples, one of the earliest known ceremonial complexes in the Maltese archipelago. At first glance, the site seems modest, a scattering of low stone walls and weathered platforms. Yet these ruins conceal a remarkable story of human ingenuity, ritual, and continuity, stretching back more than 5,500 years. Walking among the scattered stones, it is immediately clear that this was a place of careful design, a space where stone, earth, and intention converge to create something both practical and profoundly symbolic. The Skorba Temples are part of Malta's extraordinary prehistoric temple tradition, predating even the more famous megalithic complexes at Hegarchim and Monastra. Excavations have revealed two primary phases of construction: an earlier temple dating to around 3,600 BCE, and a later, more developed complex from roughly 3,300 BCE. This evolution demonstrates not only the continuity of ritual practice, but also the advancement of architectural knowledge over centuries. What drove this early community to repeatedly invest labor and resources into constructing, expanding, and refining these temples? And what beliefs were they expressing through the careful alignment and placement of stones? The layout of the Skorba Temples is deceptively simple yet precise. Curving stone walls form a series of apses, each leading to a central area that may have served as the focal point for rituals. Within these chambers, archaeologists have uncovered fragments of pottery, tools, and occasional human remains, evidence that the temples were both ceremonial and possibly funerary. But unlike other Neolithic sites, the Skorba Temples also reveal traces of domestic activity, hinting at a blending of everyday life and sacred practice. How did the builders perceive this interplay between the ordinary and the divine, and how did it shape the design of the space? The choice of location is equally deliberate. The temples occupy a gently sloping ridge, overlooking fields and low valleys, offering both visibility and seclusion. Some researchers propose that the site was oriented to capture solar phenomena, with the apses and central spaces aligned to track the movement of the sun at solstices or equinoxes. Others note the proximity to natural resources, water, arable land, and local stone, suggesting a pragmatic as well as symbolic rationale for the site's selection. And yet, the full logic behind its placement remains elusive. Was Skorba intended to mark a sacred landscape, to coordinate communal ritual, or both? The construction itself is remarkable for its precision and endurance. Early builders used large limestone blocks, carefully fitted without mortar, combined with smaller stones to create platforms and walls that have survived millennia of weathering. Some slabs bear incisions or cup marks, whose meaning is still debated. Are they symbolic, astronomical, or the marks of the craftspeople themselves? The ability to plan, transport, and erect these stones demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of engineering and social organization, as well as the capacity to mobilize a community toward long-term collective goals. How was such knowledge acquired and transmitted, and how much of it has been irretrievably lost with the passing of time? Artifacts found at Skorba provide tantalizing glimpses into the lives of those who built and used the temples. Pottery fragments, flint tools, and carved figurines suggest complex rituals and possibly symbolic offerings, hinting at a belief system that intertwined fertility, death, and cosmic order. Yet, the precise meaning of these objects and the rituals they supported remains opaque. Were the temples spaces for communal worship, sites of elite ritual, or loci for connecting with unseen forces? Could the architecture itself have encoded information about cosmology, life cycles, or social hierarchy, written in stone rather than words? The Skorba temples are also part of a broader narrative of human innovation. They mark a critical transition in Maltese prehistory, from modest, early settlements to monumental ceremonial architecture. They demonstrate a capacity not just for labor and engineering, but for abstract thought, symbolic communication, and ritualized action. And yet, despite the sophistication evident in their construction, we are left to interpret their meaning across the millennia, relying on fragmentary evidence, conjecture, and the silent testimony of stone. Walking among the ruins today, the effect is quietly profound. The low walls and curved apses guide the eye, the weathered stones suggest the hands that shaped them, and the contours of the landscape remind us that this was a site both chosen and transformed by human intention. Standing in the central chamber, one senses the deliberate framing of space, a place designed to focus attention, to channel thought, and perhaps to facilitate communion with forces both earthly and unseen. And yet, much remains hidden. The full scope of ritual, the specific beliefs, and the knowledge embedded in the stones are tantalizingly out of reach. Skorba temples, like Gavrinis Passage Tomb, West Kennet Long Barrow, and Huaca del Sol before it, reminds us that ancient monuments are more than physical structures. They are enduring records of thought, belief, and human aspiration. They speak to a desire to shape the environment, to encode knowledge and ritual into durable form, and to bridge the temporal gap between generations. And yet, they also remind us of the limits of our understanding. What did the builders of Skorba know about life, death, and the cosmos? What principles guided their hands, their vision, and their devotion? And what secrets, carefully hidden in stone and earth, remain to be discovered by those willing to look, listen, and imagine? In their quiet resilience, the Skorba Temples stand as an invitation to ponder, to question, and to marvel at the ingenuity of our distant ancestors. They ask us to consider not only what has survived, but what knowledge and intention may have been lost, waiting silently to be understood or to remain a mystery for generations to come. Leaving the sunlit ruins of Skorba Temples behind, our journey moves northward across the European continent, following the whisper of winds and the call of ancient shores to the island of Öland, off the southeastern coast of Sweden. Here, among low hills and open fields overlooking the Baltic Sea, lies the enigmatic Gettlinge Cemetery, a Neolithic burial site whose silent stones have watched over the landscape for thousands of years. From a distance, the site appears modest, linear arrangements of large stones, a few solitary markers scattered across a gentle rise. But as we approach, the deliberate placement and subtle patterning of each megalith become apparent. The cemetery exudes quiet authority, an understated monument to memory, ritual, and knowledge long faded from the world above. Gettlinge Cemetery is one of the oldest megalithic sites in Sweden, dating from around 3,500 to 2,800 BCE during the Nordic funnel beaker culture. The site comprises over 100 standing stones, many arranged in linear rows or geometric patterns, marking the graves of long-departed communities. Archaeologists have identified individual burials beneath or near the stones, often accompanied by pottery fragments, flint tools, and occasional traces of organic material. Yet for all the evidence uncovered, the cemetery retains an aura of mystery. Why were the stones placed in these precise patterns? Was there a symbolic logic, perhaps tied to cosmology, social hierarchy, or ancestral lineage, that guided their arrangement? And how much of that knowledge has been lost with the passage of time? The spatial organization of the site is striking. Unlike many contemporaneous burial grounds, Gettlinge Cemetery appears to reflect careful attention to orientation and form. Rows of stones align with the rising and setting sun at certain times of the year, suggesting a potential connection to seasonal cycles, agriculture, or celestial events. Some stones are taller, more prominent, perhaps marking individuals of special significance or denoting collective memory. Others are modest, blending into the landscape, hinting at a hierarchy or a ritualized sequence. Could these alignments and forms have served as a calendar, a map of sacred time, or a guide for ceremonial processions? Or were they intended primarily as markers of social and spiritual authority, visible to generations who walked these lands long ago? The construction itself is a testament to human ingenuity and labor. Each stone was selected, shaped, and erected with painstaking effort, without the benefit of advanced tools or machinery. Moving these stones across uneven terrain, aligning them with precision, and securing them in place required careful planning, communal cooperation, and a shared vision. What techniques allowed Neolithic people to manipulate these megaliths with such accuracy? And what level of social organization or ritualized practice was necessary to coordinate such an undertaking? The answers are partially lost, leaving us to marvel at the technical and conceptual sophistication of these ancient communities. Artifacts recovered from the cemetery provide tantalizing clues to the lives of those interred. Pottery fragments bear simple yet deliberate decorations, while flint tools hint at daily practices and the intimate connection between survival and ritual. Yet the lack of extensive grave goods raises questions. Were these burials purely ceremonial, emphasizing ritual over material wealth? Did the placement of the stones themselves constitute the most important form of memory or spiritual communication? And if so, what beliefs, now forgotten, guided the selection of stones, their arrangement, and the ceremonies performed among them? The relationship between the cemetery and its surrounding landscape adds yet another layer of intrigue. Perched on a gentle rise overlooking fertile plains and the distant sea, the site commands both visibility and seclusion. Could this elevated position have been chosen to bridge the worlds of the living and the dead, offering a vantage point to watch over settlements, agricultural fields, or ritual pathways? Was the Baltic Sea itself part of the symbolic landscape, its horizon incorporated into the cosmology of the builders? And how did the natural environment, from wind to seasonal light, influence the experience of those who visited or constructed the site? Walking among the stones today, the subtle interplay of shadow, texture, and space becomes apparent. The megaliths seem to guide the eye along deliberate paths, suggesting processions or contemplative pauses. Standing at one end of a row, one senses the intentional framing of sight lines, the rhythm of repetition, and the tension between monumentality and intimacy. It is as if the builders encoded knowledge of human perception, time, and ritual into the arrangement of stone itself. Yet the exact meaning remains elusive. Were these alignments purely aesthetic, spiritual, or functional? And how much of the original ritual context can we reconstruct from the weathered stones and partial evidence left behind? Gettlinge Cemetery, like Skorba Temples, Gavrinis Passage, Tomb, and West Kennet Long Barrow. Before it, invites reflection on the enduring human desire to structure space, commemorate the dead, and communicate across generations. Its stones stand as a silent archive of thought, belief, and communal endeavor, an enduring testament to the ingenuity and imagination of Neolithic people. And yet, for all that remains, the cemetery also reminds us of the limits of modern understanding. The precise purpose of each stone, the rituals that once animated the site, and the knowledge embedded in its spatial organization are tantalizingly beyond our grasp. As the wind brushes over the standing stones, carrying with it the distant scent of the sea, one is struck by the quiet persistence of human intention. The site asks us to consider not only what we can see, but what lies hidden beneath layers of time. The beliefs, the social structures, the spiritual knowledge that guided construction, use, and memory. Gettlinge Cemetery endures as a space of contemplation and mystery, inviting us to ask questions that have persisted for millennia. What knowledge did the builders hold about life, death, and the cosmos? What truths were encoded in stone, and how much remains to be discovered, perhaps forever out of reach? Here, in the soft light of the Baltic horizon, Gettlinge Cemetery challenges us to look closer, to listen more carefully, and to embrace the unknown. It stands not just as a resting place for the dead, but as a testament to human aspiration, ingenuity, and reverence, a reminder that some mysteries endure precisely because they speak to something deeper than stone alone. Leaving the windswept stones of Gettlinge Cemetery behind, our journey continues southwest across Europe, tracing the thread of ancient human endeavor to the sunlit plains of Andalusia, Spain. Here, near the modern town of Antequera, rises one of the most imposing megalithic monuments of the Iberian Peninsula, the Dolmen de Menga. From a distance, it appears as a simple stone mound, yet closer inspection reveals a structure of remarkable ambition and scale, an enduring testament to human labor, vision, and perhaps knowledge that transcends the ordinary. Massive vertical stones, some over 4 meters tall, support a series of horizontal slabs, forming a chamber so vast that it seems almost architectural rather than merely funerary. How did communities of the 3rd millennium BCE conceive, quarry, and raise such enormous stones without metal tools or advanced machinery? And why choose this particular location, in the shadow of the distant El Torcal limestone hills, for a monument of such magnitude? Dolmen de Menga is part of the Antequera Dolmen site, a UNESCO World Heritage Complex that includes the Viera and El Romeral dolmens, yet Menga stands apart in both size and design. Measuring over 27 meters in length, It is one of the largest known megalithic tombs in Europe, and its interior chamber is vast enough to evoke a sense of awe even today. Archaeologists estimate that its construction dates to around 3,750 to 3,650 BCE, making it contemporaneous with some of the earliest monumental tombs in the Western Mediterranean. The sheer scale of labor involved, moving, shaping, and positioning stones weighing several tons, speaks not only to technical skill, but to a society capable of long-term planning, organization, and shared purpose. But what motivated such effort? Was it solely a burial site, or did it serve broader ceremonial or symbolic functions, now lost to history? The location of Dolmen de Menga is particularly striking. Situated on a plain near the fertile valley of the Guadalhorce River, it commands a view of both the town and the dramatic limestone formations of El Torcal. Some researchers have proposed that the dolmen's alignment reflects a deliberate interaction with the landscape, oriented toward the mountains rather than the rising sun, as is common in other European megaliths. Could this alignment signify an ancient reverence for specific landforms, perhaps associating the tomb with sacred peaks, natural forces, or ancestral territories? What cosmology, if any, guided the placement of these stones? And how did the builders conceptualize the relationship between earth, sky, and stone? Inside the dolmen, the construction is both functional and sophisticated. Massive vertical orthostats support horizontal capstones, creating a chamber and corridor that has endured millennia of erosion, seismic activity, and human interference. The precision with which the stones fit together is remarkable, suggesting an understanding of weight distribution, balance, and stability that challenges assumptions about Neolithic engineering. How did early communities develop these methods? Were they transmitted orally, through apprenticeship, or through trial and error over generations? And, intriguingly, the dolmen's interior appears deliberately proportioned to accommodate the human body, both as a space for burial and as a ceremonial environment. Was this a design intended for ritual performance, for the interment of elite individuals, or for communal gatherings of a spiritual nature? Excavations have revealed that Dolmen de Menga contained multiple burials, accompanied by flint tools, pottery fragments, and traces of personal adornment. Yet much of its use remains mysterious. Unlike some megalithic tombs designed for easy access, Menga's construction emphasizes permanence and enclosure, suggesting that once interred, the dead were not meant to be disturbed. Could this indicate a belief in an afterlife, ancestral guardianship, or a symbolic sealing of knowledge within stone? And what of the spatial and symbolic logic behind the long corridor leading to the chamber, a feature shared with other megaliths yet interpreted in varying ways? Some scholars have suggested that the Dolmen de Menga represents a form of prehistoric monumentality distinct from other European tombs. Its connection to the surrounding landscape, its extraordinary size, and its orientation toward El Torcal imply a symbolic language that extends beyond burial. Was it intended as a territorial marker, a site of ritual observation, or even a repository of cosmological knowledge? The repetition of certain forms and proportions, coupled with the precision of construction, hints at an understanding of geometry and spatial relationships that modern observers can recognize but not fully explain. Standing before Menga today, one is struck by the tension between permanence and fragility. The stones have weathered thousands of years, yet their arrangement conveys deliberate purpose and human intention. The space invites reflection. The scale overwhelms, while the details, the slight gaps between orthostats, the careful balancing of massive slabs, suggest intimate care. It is a place designed to endure, to communicate something fundamental about the people who built it, yet the meaning of that communication remains tantalizingly out of reach. Dolmen de Menga, like Gettlinge Cemetery, Skorba Temples, and the Gavrinis passage tomb before it, reminds us that ancient monuments are more than the sum of their stones. They are repositories of labor, belief, and vision, standing across millennia to challenge our understanding of prehistoric knowledge. And as we trace our fingers along the weathered surfaces, imagine the hands that raised these stones and consider the vistas of mountains and plains they once gazed upon. We are confronted with the enduring question: what knowledge, belief, or ritual guided their creation, and what secrets remain hidden within the earth, the stone, and the landscape itself? In the quiet of the Andalusian plain, under the watchful gaze of El Torcal, Dolmen de Menga continues to speak in silence, an invitation to wonder, to reflect, and to confront the enduring mysteries of human ingenuity and aspiration. What was encoded in these massive stones, and what truths of Neolithic life and belief remain just beyond our grasp, waiting for those who seek them with patience and imagination? Leaving the sun-baked stones of Dolmen de Menga behind, our journey shifts westward across the Atlantic and deep into the arid valleys of northern Peru to the sprawling ruins of Chan Chan, the ancient capital of the Chimu civilization. Here, in the desolate coastal plains of La Libertad, rise the imposing adobe walls of a city that once sheltered tens of thousands of people. Unlike the stone monuments of Europe, the Chimu walls are molded from sun-dried bricks, their surfaces etched with geometric patterns, friezes of fish, birds, and waves, and enigmatic symbols whose meaning continues to elude archaeologists. The scale is staggering. Walls up to 8 meters high, stretching across nearly 20 square kilometers, enclosing a complex network of courtyards, plazas, and ceremonial spaces. How did the Chimu achieve such architectural mastery with mud, water, and simple tools in an environment so hostile to permanence? The walls of Chan Chan were not mere boundaries. They were living structures, simultaneously functional, symbolic, and monumental. Constructed between the 9th and 15th centuries CE, they served as administrative centers, elite residences, and ceremonial spaces, reflecting the Chimu's sophisticated urban planning and social hierarchy. Each wall, carefully designed and reinforced, communicates both power and artistry. Some walls form massive enclosures called ciudadelas, which housed palaces and storerooms, while others mark ceremonial plazas where public rituals likely took place. How did these constructions convey authority and control over the city's inhabitants, and what knowledge of engineering, hydrology, and social organization made it possible to maintain such expansive structures in a desert environment prone to erosion and occasional flooding? The ornamentation on the walls adds layers of mystery. Stylized depictions of waves, birds, fish, and abstract geometric motifs cover the adobe surfaces in repeating patterns that seem to communicate more than decoration alone. Some researchers suggest these images were symbolic guides, representing agricultural cycles, marine resources, or cosmological principles. Others propose they functioned as markers of clan identity, ritual significance, or political hierarchy. Yet the precise meanings remain speculative, encoded in a language that has not survived. Could the walls themselves have been a form of communication, a visual record of knowledge, law, and belief preserved in mud for generations? Or were they deliberately enigmatic, designed to impress, intimidate, or inspire awe in those who entered the city? The construction techniques themselves are remarkable. Each adobe brick was shaped by hand, sun-dried, and carefully layered with mortar made from earth, straw, and water. Walls were reinforced with buttresses and integrated channels to divert seasonal floodwaters. Some scholars suggest that the Chimu may have developed methods to protect their structures from the coastal desert's shifting sands and occasional heavy rains. But even with such techniques, the endurance of Chan Chan through centuries of erosion, earthquakes, and environmental change is astonishing. How much of this knowledge was empirical, learned through trial and error, and how much represented a codified understanding of material science, engineering, and environmental adaptation that has since been lost. The urban planning of Chanchan adds another layer of intrigue. The city was divided into multiple walled compounds, each with its own system of storage, living spaces, and ceremonial areas. Narrow alleys, ramps, and plazas appear carefully designed to regulate movement, access, and visibility, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of social control and ritual choreography. Could these layouts encode cosmological or spiritual principles, directing inhabitants' attention toward celestial events, sacred spaces, or ritualized processes? And how did these spatial arrangements shape the lives of ordinary people, priests and rulers alike? Despite centuries of study, many questions remain. Excavations and surveys have revealed traces of human activity, ceremonial offerings, and tools, but the precise function of many spaces within the city is still debated. How did the Chimu integrate religion, governance, and daily life in a way that allowed such monumental walls to emerge and endure? What rituals took place within the courtyards, and how did the geometric motifs and symbolic carvings relate to those practices? And perhaps most importantly, what knowledge of governance, astronomy, or sacred tradition was deliberately encoded into the very fabric of the city? Walking among the ruins today, the scale and detail of Chanchan inspire awe. The walls rise like silent witnesses, their mud surfaces etched with centuries-old symbols, telling stories we can only partially read. Shadows play across patterned reliefs, while the desert wind shifts, carrying dust and whispers of the past. There is a sense of intentionality, of a civilization that understood how architecture could shape perception, convey authority, and endure across generations. Yet even as the human eye takes in the complexity, the city guards its secrets. Many walls are eroded, and some symbolic motifs defy interpretation, hinting at a depth of knowledge now lost to time. Chanchan, like Dolmen de Menga, Skorba Temples, and Gettlinge Cemetery before it, is a reminder that ancient structures often communicate in ways that transcend words. They are expressions of power, belief, and ingenuity, silent records of human aspiration, perseverance, and understanding. The Chimu walls challenge us to consider not only what has survived, but what may have been deliberately encoded, hidden, or lost. What rituals, knowledge, and social structures allowed such monumental urban planning to flourish in a harsh coastal desert? What messages were the Chimu attempting to convey through patterns, layout, and scale? And, most intriguingly, what truths remain buried beneath layers of earth, sand, and time, waiting for those who are willing to observe with patience and wonder? In the quiet expanse of northern Peru, as the sun sets over the arid plains and casts long shadows across the adobe walls, Chanchan stands as both a monument and a mystery. It is a place where human ambition, creativity, and resilience meet the unknowable past, inviting us to reflect on the limits of our understanding and the enduring power of structures built to last, speak, and inspire across the millennia. Leaving behind the vast adobe walls of Chanchan, our journey turns northward across the Mediterranean to the rugged, sun-drenched landscapes of Sardinia, Italy. Nestled among rolling hills and rocky outcrops stands one of the most enigmatic and enduring symbols of Sardinia's prehistoric past, Nuraghe Su Nuraxi. From a distance, it appears as a singular, imposing tower of stone, rising above the landscape like a sentinel of time. Yet closer inspection reveals a complex of interlocking towers, walls, and ancillary structures, a prehistoric citadel whose scale, sophistication, and purpose continue to intrigue archaeologists, historians, and visitors alike. How could communities of the second millennium BCE construct such enduring monuments without the benefit of iron tools or advanced machinery? And what knowledge, now partially lost, guided the placement, form, and function of this ancient fortress? Nuraghe Su Nuraxi is part of a broader network of nuraghe that dot the Sardinian landscape, built by the Nuraghic civilization between roughly 1900 and 730 BCE. Su Nuraxi stands out among these for its complexity, a central tower, or keep, surrounded by 4 corner towers, interconnected with thick walls and corridors. Excavations suggest that the site evolved over centuries, expanding from a single tower into a fortified complex with communal spaces, storage rooms, and defensive bastions. What motivated these repeated modifications? Was it the need for defense, the consolidation of power, ritual significance, or a combination of social and spiritual priorities? The architecture itself is striking. Each massive block of basalt or limestone was carefully shaped and fitted without mortar, creating walls capable of enduring millennia of weathering, seismic activity, and human interference. The precision with which stones were arranged demonstrates not only technical skill, but a deep understanding of geometry, balance, and load distribution. How did the Nuraghic builders achieve such precision? Were there techniques, now forgotten, for measuring, leveling, and lifting that surpass our modern assumptions of prehistoric capability? And what social structure enabled the coordination of such labor-intensive projects over generations? Inside the central tower, one encounters a narrow spiral staircase carved into the stone, leading upward to small chambers and terraces. The spaces within are intimate, yet the structure as a whole conveys power, permanence, and foresight. Some scholars suggest that these interior arrangements were designed for both defensive and ceremonial purposes, allowing a few to control and protect the many. Could the towers have also functioned as observatories, guiding agricultural cycles or tracking celestial movements? And if so, what knowledge of astronomy or environmental cycles did the builders possess, encoded in the very stones of Su Nuraxi? Archaeological findings reveal that the site was not solely a fortress. Pottery shards, bronze tools, and traces of ritual activity suggest a complex life, blending defense, domesticity, and spiritual practice. Nuraghe Su Nuraxi may have served as a residence for elite families, a meeting place for the community, and a ceremonial center, all within a single interwoven complex. How did these overlapping functions shape the social and spiritual life of its inhabitants? And what belief system or cosmology inspired the intricate arrangement of towers, courtyards, and corridors? The strategic location of Su Nuraxi adds another layer of intrigue. Perched on a hilltop overlooking fertile valleys, water sources, and trade routes, it offers visibility across miles of landscape. Was this vantage chosen purely for defense, or did it also serve a symbolic or ritual purpose? Could the orientation of the towers have been aligned with the sun, the stars, or the surrounding mountains to convey authority, mark seasonal change, or connect with forces unseen? And if so, how much of this knowledge was shared among the wider Nuraghic population, and how much was closely held by a select few? Even today, the site's enduring complexity challenges interpretation. The Nuraghe's stone walls, spiral staircases, and ancillary buildings speak to a level of architectural planning and social coordination that seems sophisticated beyond expectation. How were labor, materials, and knowledge organized over decades or even centuries to create a structure that could endure the test of time? What motivated the Nuraghic people to invest such energy into a monument, whose design simultaneously protected, elevated, and perhaps mystified its inhabitants and visitors? Walking among the towers and climbing the narrow stairways, one is struck by the interplay of space, light, and shadow. The architecture seems to guide perception. A corridor narrows to focus attention. A tower opens to a panoramic view. A chamber isolates the individual. It is as if the builders encoded principles of movement, perspective, and even emotion into stone itself. Were these effects deliberate, intended to create ritualized experiences, or did they emerge as a byproduct of practical design? And what other aspects of human experience, social, spiritual, or cosmological, might have been encoded in the very architecture of Su Nuraxi? Nuraghe Su Nuraxi, like the Chimu walls of Chan Chan, Dolmen de Menga, and Skorba Temples before it, reminds us that ancient structures are more than physical monuments. They are expressions of knowledge, belief, and intention, preserved in stone and earth, and yet always partially obscured by time. Standing within its walls, tracing the contours of its towers, one senses the echo of past lives, of human thought and aspiration reaching across millennia. And yet, much remains unknown. The full scope of its ritual significance, the precise reasoning behind its construction, and the knowledge it may have encoded are all tantalizingly out of reach. In the quiet Sardinian hills, as the wind brushes across ancient stone and the sun casts shadows over the spiraling towers, Nuraghe Su Nuraxi invites contemplation. It is a monument to human ingenuity, resilience, and imagination, standing across time as both a record and a question. What truths did the builders inscribe in these stones, and what secrets of social, spiritual, or astronomical knowledge lie hidden, waiting for the patient observer to uncover? The answers remain elusive, yet the monument continues to speak, silently, persistently, and profoundly across the millennia. Leaving the sun-baked towers of Nuraghe Su Nuraxi behind, our journey traces the contours of the ancient world once more, this time eastward across the Mediterranean to the rugged hills of the Peloponnese in Greece. There, on a gentle rise near Mycenae, lies the Beehive tomb of Atreus, also known as the Treasury of Atreus, a monument whose very form evokes both grandeur and mystery. From afar, it appears as a simple conical mound, yet as we approach, the scale and sophistication of its construction become impossible to ignore. The massive stones, precisely fitted, rise in a perfect circular corbel, creating a domed chamber that has endured more than 3 millennia. How did the Mycenaeans, with only Bronze Age tools and rudimentary machinery, engineer such a precise and lasting structure? And what knowledge guided the hands that laid each stone with such care? The Beehive tomb is classified as a tholos, a circular burial chamber with a high vaulted ceiling, constructed around 1250 BCE. Its design is striking in both ambition and execution. A long entrance passage, or dromos, leads into a grand circular chamber over 13 meters in diameter, capped by an intricate corbelled dome. The weight of the stones is distributed with remarkable precision, allowing the structure to remain intact for centuries. Some scholars suggest the tomb served as the final resting place for kings or elite figures, yet there is debate regarding the number of occupants, their identities, and the rituals conducted within these hallowed walls. What ceremonies unfolded here, in the flickering torchlight, among the echoing stones of the chamber? And what messages, political or spiritual, were encoded in its monumental design? The construction techniques themselves are astonishing. The corbelled dome, rising without central support, required not only skill, but an understanding of geometry, balance, and stone behavior that seems almost modern in conception. Massive blocks were quarried, transported, and precisely placed, while the dromos was lined with carefully stacked stones to create a dramatic approach. How did Mycenaean builders calculate angles, weight distribution, and alignment without formal mathematical notation? And what inspired the choice of this monumental form, combining utility, grandeur, and symbolic resonance in a single, enduring structure? The tomb's interior is both austere and commanding. Standing within the circular chamber, the eye is drawn upward along concentric rings of stone that converge in a near-perfect apex. The acoustics of the space amplify even the slightest sound, suggesting that ritual or ceremonial practice may have been considered in the design. Some researchers propose that the tomb was deliberately constructed to evoke a sense of cosmic order, echoing the circularity of the sun, the heavens, or celestial cycles. Could the corbelled dome itself have held symbolic meaning, representing a connection between the earthly realm and the divine? And if so, how did these ancient architects translate such abstract ideas into stone with enduring precision? Artifacts recovered from the site add further layers to its mystery. Fragmentary remains, pottery, gold ornaments, and ceremonial objects hint at the social status of those interred, yet the specifics remain tantalizingly unclear. Were these items merely symbols of wealth and power? Or did they serve ritual or spiritual functions, perhaps guiding the deceased into an afterlife? And what was the significance of the tomb's precise orientation, with the dromos opening toward a particular direction, sunrise, sunset, or a notable landscape feature? Could this alignment have been astronomical, symbolic, or both, linking the tomb to cycles of nature and human understanding of the cosmos? The Beehive tomb is part of a broader network of monumental structures at Mycenae, including other tholoi, fortifications, and palace complexes, yet it stands apart in both size and elegance. Its construction reflects not only technical mastery, but a sophisticated social organization capable of mobilizing labor, resources, and knowledge over long periods. How did these communities coordinate such monumental projects? And what belief systems, political motivations, or ancestral traditions drove the commitment required to raise stones that would endure millennia? Walking through the long dromos, entering the vaulted chamber, one cannot help but feel the deliberate orchestration of experience, the narrowing passage, the rising weight of the stones, the sense of enclosure and anticipation, culminating in the awe-inspiring circular interior. The tomb communicates with the visitor not through words but through scale, proportion, and the tangible presence of stone. Yet for all its clarity of design, its ultimate meaning remains elusive. Were the Beehive tombs expressions of political power, religious devotion, social cohesion, or all of these simultaneously? And what knowledge, architectural, astronomical, or spiritual, was encoded into their very stones, waiting to be deciphered by a patient observer? The Beehive tomb of Atreus, like Nuraghe Su Nuraxi, Chan Chan, and Dolmen de Menga before it, reminds us that ancient structures are living records of human thought, belief, and intention. They are monuments to ingenuity and vision, enduring across centuries to challenge our understanding and provoke reflection. Standing within its vaulted walls, one senses the continuum of human ambition, the desire to memorialize, to inspire, to create spaces that endure, communicate, and evoke awe. Yet, for all its grandeur and sophistication, the tomb keeps its secrets. What rituals unfolded in the shadows of the corbelled dome? What knowledge guided the placement of each stone, the orientation of the dromos, and the proportion of the chamber? And how much of this understanding, technical, spiritual, or societal, has been lost to the passage of time, leaving us only with the silent testimony of stone? In its quiet majesty, the Beehive tomb of Atreus challenges us to look closer, to wonder more deeply, and to acknowledge that some mysteries endure precisely because they speak to forces, knowledge, and beliefs that transcend our modern comprehension. Leaving the solemn chambers of the Beehive tomb of Atreus behind, our journey stretches eastward, across the Aegean and into the rugged heartlands of Anatolia. Here, in the shadow of jagged mountains and fertile plains, lie the remnants of Hattusa, the capital of the Hittite Empire, a city of monumental ambition and enduring enigma. What immediately captures the imagination is not the size of the city alone, but the enormity and precision of its fortifications. The Cyclopean walls of Hattusa rise from the earth like a testament to human ingenuity, They're massive limestone blocks, some weighing several tons, fitted with meticulous care into an intricate defensive lattice. How were these colossal stones transported, shaped, and assembled in a society without cranes or modern machinery? And why construct walls of such scale and complexity in a city already ensconced in naturally formidable terrain? Hattusa's fortifications, dated to the late Bronze Age around 1400 to 1200 BCE, represent both strategic mastery and symbolic power. The walls stretch for kilometers, punctuated by massive gates, bastions, and towers, forming multiple concentric enclosures that protected the citadel at the city's core. Their sheer scale, stones as tall as men, arranged in layered courses without mortar, evokes the legendary Cyclopean construction attributed to giants by later civilizations. Yet these walls are not merely imposing. They are precise, organized, and sophisticated, demonstrating an understanding of structural engineering and defensive tactics that continues to inspire awe. How much of this expertise was empirical, learned through trial and generations of labor, and how much represents codified knowledge of mechanics, geometry, or even cosmology? The city's most striking features are its gates, particularly the Lion Gate and the Royal Gate, which combine colossal stones with intricate bas-relief carvings. The Lion Gate, carved with paired lions poised as guardians, projects both intimidation and protection. These sculpted figures, larger than life and sharply stylized, seem to communicate authority across time. Were they intended purely as symbolic guardians, or did they serve a more complex function, an invocation of spiritual protection, a demonstration of royal power, or a coded message to those who approached the city? The presence of symbolic art integrated into fortifications suggests that the Hittites understood architecture not merely as a practical tool, but as a medium for expressing ideology, spirituality, and hierarchy. The construction techniques used at Hattusa remain a subject of fascination. Stones were quarried from nearby hills, carefully shaped and transported over uneven terrain, sometimes lifted into place using only ropes, ramps, and sheer human effort. The precision of placement, particularly in areas subjected to seismic activity, indicates an intuitive knowledge of stability, weight distribution, and resilience. How did Hittite builders learn to move such massive stones and ensure their long-term endurance? Did they pass techniques orally, through apprenticeship, or in written form as hinted at by surviving cuneiform texts that describe city planning, construction, and ceremonial regulation? Inside the walls, the city reveals its dual purpose as both sanctuary and statement. Residential quarters, administrative areas, temples, and open spaces were carefully integrated within the protective enclosures. The spatial layout appears intentional. Areas of restricted access suggest zones of privilege, ritual, or governance, while wide thoroughfares accommodate movement, observation, and defense. How did the architecture shape daily life, social hierarchy, and ritual practice? Were the walls simply defensive, or did they also serve as ceremonial frames, marking processions, festivals, or cosmic alignments visible only to the initiated? The symbolic and practical functions of Hattusa's fortifications are further deepened by their placement in relation to the surrounding landscape. The city nestles between rocky hills and valleys, commanding expansive views over the plains below, allowing its rulers to monitor trade routes, agricultural fields, and potential threats. Yet the walls are oriented with care, not merely to follow topography, but to create a dramatic impression from outside the gates. Was the orientation of these walls guided by astronomical events, religious beliefs, or geomantic principles now lost to time? Could the Hittites have encoded knowledge of celestial cycles, territorial boundaries, or social organization into the very form of the walls themselves? Archaeological excavations reveal additional enigmas. Beneath, between, and alongside the Cyclopean stones, traces of ritual deposits, ceramic fragments, small figurines, and offerings have been found, suggesting that construction itself may have been accompanied by ceremonial acts. Were the walls imbued with spiritual significance, designed to act as both physical and metaphysical barriers? Did the laborers who erected these stones perform rituals to ensure protection, longevity, or divine favor? And if so, how much of that intangible knowledge was understood by ordinary citizens versus the ruling elite? Walking along the walls today, the enormity of their construction overwhelms. Massive stones, some the size of small rooms, are juxtaposed with carefully measured gaps, gateways, and defensive apertures. Shadows fall across the carvings of lions, snakes, and abstract motifs, shifting with the light of day to create a dynamic interaction between stone, sun, and observer. It is impossible not to sense deliberate orchestration. Every course of stone, every protrusion, every angle, appears designed to convey power, order, and perhaps a coded narrative of the city's values and knowledge. Yet, for all its clarity and precision, much remains hidden. What guided the vision of these walls, and what practical, spiritual, or symbolic functions remain imperceptible to modern observers? Hattusa Cyclopean walls, like the Beehive tomb of Atreus, Nuraghe Su Nuraxi, and Dolmen de Menga before it, remind us that ancient structures often serve multiple purposes simultaneously: functional, symbolic, and experiential. They encode the social, technological, and spiritual knowledge of their builders, offering clues to lives lived millennia ago, yet preserving mysteries that elude full comprehension. Standing atop a bastion or gazing through a monumental gate, one is struck by the continuity of human ambition, the desire to protect, to impress, to communicate across generations, and to leave something enduring in the landscape. And yet, despite the wealth of knowledge we have accumulated about Hattusa, through excavation, inscriptions, and comparative study, the Cyclopean walls continue to guard secrets. What rituals, cosmological knowledge, or societal structures were encoded in their construction? How much of their purpose remains invisible to us, obscured by time, weather, and centuries of human interpretation? And what insights might still be hidden, waiting to be revealed by those who approach with patience, observation, and imagination? In the quiet hills of central Anatolia, as the wind rustles against towering stones and sunlight casts long shadows over the gates and bastions, the Cyclopean walls of Hattusa endure as both a monument and a question. They challenge us to consider the limits of our understanding, the sophistication of ancient societies, and the enduring human desire to shape the world in stone, a desire that communicates across millennia, silently, persistently, and profoundly. Leaving behind the colossal Cyclopean fortifications of Hattusa, our journey returns once more to the misted hills and fertile plains of northwestern Europe, where human ingenuity and spiritual aspiration converge in a different form. Here, in the verdant Boyne Valley of Ireland, sits Newgrange, a passage tomb that has captivated scholars, travelers, and dreamers for centuries. At first glance, it may appear deceptively simple, a gently sloping mound of earth encircled by carefully placed curbstones. Yet this seemingly unassuming monument hides a labyrinth of stone and passage within, a structure of such precise alignment, enduring design, and symbolic complexity that it continues to challenge our understanding of Neolithic society. How did the builders of Newgrange conceive of a monument that perfectly balances engineering, ritual, and celestial knowledge? And what inspired the meticulous effort required to raise such a lasting testament to human vision? Newgrange dates to approximately 3,200 BCE, making it older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids of Giza. It is part of the Bruna Boyne complex, one of Europe's most significant Neolithic landscapes, yet it stands apart for its architectural sophistication. Its circular mound measures over 80 meters in diameter and rises more than 12 meters above the surrounding fields. Encircling the base, more than 90 curbstones bear intricate carvings of spirals, lozenges, and concentric circles, their meanings still debated by archaeologists and historians. Some see these motifs as symbolic maps of cosmology, life cycles, or spiritual belief, while others suggest they encode knowledge of time, seasonal cycles, or sacred ritual. Could these carvings represent a form of communication now lost to time? A silent language of stone intended for those who once walked these lands? The tomb's passage and chamber are its most extraordinary features. Constructed with massive stones, some weighing several tons, the interior is remarkably sophisticated. A corbelled roof rises in a perfect dome above a cruciform chamber, creating a space both intimate and awe-inspiring. The corbelling technique, which gradually layers stones inward to form a self-supporting roof, demonstrates an advanced understanding of weight distribution and structural integrity. How did Neolithic builders achieve such precision without written instructions or advanced engineering tools? Was this knowledge purely empirical, passed down through generations, or did it involve a conceptual understanding of geometry and physics that we are only beginning to appreciate? Perhaps the most celebrated and enigmatic feature of Newgrange is its alignment with the winter solstice. Each year, as the sun rises in the southeast on the shortest days of the year, its first light penetrates a narrow roof box above the entrance, illuminating the inner chamber in a golden glow. For approximately 17 minutes, the sunlight travels along the passage, revealing the chamber's interior in a display that is both dramatic and deeply symbolic. How did these Neolithic builders predict the solstice with such accuracy, using only observation and rudimentary tools? Was this alignment purely ritualistic, marking the return of the sun and the cyclical rebirth of the year? Or did it hold deeper spiritual significance, a bridge between the worlds of the living and the dead? The scale and sophistication of Newgrange imply a highly organized society. The construction required thousands of laborers, carefully coordinated over decades. Stones were quarried from distant sources, some transported from as far as 20 kilometers away, shaped and placed with extraordinary care. How did these early communities mobilize resources, labor, and knowledge to construct such a precise and enduring monument? And how much of their expertise, astronomical, engineering, and ritualistic, has been lost to time, leaving us only fragments of a greater understanding? Artifacts and human remains found within Newgrange offer additional clues, yet raise further questions. Excavations have revealed cremated remains, flint tools, and pottery, suggesting that the tomb was used as a burial site for select individuals, perhaps those of high status or spiritual significance. Yet the tomb was clearly designed for more than simple interment. Its alignment, carvings, and passage indicate a symbolic and ceremonial purpose. Was the chamber intended to house the dead, guide the living in ritual, or act as a conduit between realms? And what role did the surrounding landscape, the river, the hills, and other nearby monuments, play in the spiritual and ceremonial life of those who built it? The carvings themselves deepen the mystery. Spirals, arcs, chevrons, and concentric circles repeat across the curbstones and interior slabs, forming patterns that hint at hidden meaning. Some researchers suggest they may encode lunar cycles, solar movements, or seasonal changes, while others propose they are abstract representations of life, death, and cosmic order. Could these symbols have been used as mnemonic devices, guiding ritual knowledge or oral traditions? Or were they intended as sacred art, intended to inspire reverence and reflection? And if so, what cultural, spiritual, or cosmological principles did they encode, principles we may never fully decipher? Walking along the exterior of the mound today, one senses the careful orchestration of form, space, and experience. The circular mound rises gently from the land, yet within it lies a meticulously crafted interior, perfectly proportioned, resilient to millennia of weather and human activity. The winter solstice alignment transforms the tomb into a living instrument, interacting with light, earth, and time in a way that evokes both wonder and reverence. How many generations observed the solstice from the entrance, passing down knowledge and ritual, guided by sunlight and stone? And how much of that understanding was lost as communities evolved, migrated, or disappeared from this landscape? Newgrange, like Hattusa, the Beehive tomb of Atreus, and Nuraghe Su Nuraxi before it, demonstrates that ancient societies were capable of profound sophistication, architectural, astronomical, and symbolic, often in ways that defy modern assumptions about prehistoric peoples. Yet, for all we know about its construction and alignment, the tomb preserves mysteries that resist full interpretation. How did Neolithic communities perceive time, space, and the cosmos? What rituals unfolded in the chamber, beneath the painted stones, or in the surrounding valley? And what knowledge, encoded in the mound's architecture, carvings, and celestial orientation, remains beyond our reach, a testament to human ingenuity that challenges the modern mind? Standing before Newgrange today, as the soft Irish light shifts across the curbstones and the wind carries the whispers of the Boyne Valley, one is struck by the continuum of human aspiration. The mound is simultaneously a tomb, a calendar, a monument, and a mystery, a place where technical mastery, spiritual imagination, and artistic expression converge. The monument endures as a silent teacher, inviting observation, reflection, and wonder. What secrets of Neolithic life, belief, and knowledge are still hidden within its stones, waiting for those willing to look, measure, and contemplate with patience and imagination? And how many aspects of the ancient world, its ritual, social order, and cosmology, remain encoded in stone, still invisible to the modern eye, yet profoundly present to those who can perceive its subtle design? In the quiet of the Boyne Valley, beneath the Irish sky, Newgrange remains more than a burial site. It is a dialogue across millennia, a convergence of earth, stone, and light that challenges our understanding, evokes awe, and reminds us of the ingenuity, vision, and spiritual depth of our distant ancestors. Its mysteries endure, inviting each visitor to consider not only what is visible, but what lies hidden. Knowledge, ritual, and cosmic insight that may forever remain just beyond our grasp, yet continues to inspire wonder, reflection, and the timeless pursuit of understanding. Leaving the misted mounds of Newgrange behind, our journey returns to the rugged and sunlit landscapes of the eastern Mediterranean, where mountains meet the azure waters of the Mediterranean Sea. Along the jagged cliffs of southwestern Turkey, near the ancient cities of Lycia, lie the Lycian rock tombs, a breathtaking series of monumental facades carved directly into sheer cliffs overlooking the valleys below. From a distance, they appear almost as palaces suspended in air, their intricate stone facades emerging organically from the rock face, blending architecture and natural topography in a way that seems almost otherworldly. How did the Lycian builders achieve such precision in carving stone directly from cliffs, sometimes hundreds of feet above the valley floor? And what purpose, beyond the obvious, did these breathtaking tombs serve in the lives of the people who created them? The Lycian rock. Tombs date primarily from the 4th to 1st centuries BCE, during the height of Lycian civilization. Each tomb is hewn meticulously from solid limestone, often featuring columned porticos, pediments, and elaborately detailed facades that mirror the architectural styles of freestanding Lycian houses and temples. These facades suggest that the tombs were intended not merely as burial sites, but as enduring reflections of earthly dwellings, allowing the deceased to continue living in the afterlife. Yet even the most detailed study leaves much to speculation. What ceremonies took place at these cliffside monuments? How were bodies interred and honored within? And how did these practices reflect Lycian beliefs about life, death, and the cosmos? The scale and daring of the tombs are immediately striking. Some are perched high on cliffs, accessible only by precarious ledges or paths carved into rock. Others seem almost suspended, their sheer walls plummeting into the valley below. The logistics alone, planning, quarrying, carving, and transporting materials, defy modern assumptions about ancient capability. How did the Lycians carve such precise and ornate structures without scaffolding as we know it today? What engineering knowledge and methods of measurement allowed them to ensure both aesthetic symmetry and structural stability? And why devote such effort to tombs, which by definition serve the dead rather than monuments for the living? Many of the facades imitate the architecture of Lycian houses, with columned entrances, pediments, and interior chambers. Some include carved reliefs depicting scenes of warriors, banquets, or mythological motifs. This blend of domestic, ceremonial, and symbolic architecture suggests a profound cultural philosophy. The tombs were not only sites of interment, but expressions of identity, status, and cosmology. How much of this design was practical, reflecting beliefs about the journey of the soul, and how much was performative, projecting power, prestige, or reverence to the living community? And did the Lycians believe that the tomb itself, carved from living rock, could protect, sustain, or even animate the spirit of the deceased? The interior chambers of these tombs are often as intriguing as the facades. Though smaller and simpler than the exteriors suggest, the chambers were carefully designed to accommodate burials, offerings, and ritual activity. Some contain evidence of funerary goods, including pottery, jewelry, and weapons, suggesting a belief in continuity of life, status, and protection after death. The narrow corridors and low ceilings of the chambers contrast sharply with the grandeur of the exteriors, emphasizing a journey from the visible world of the living into a hidden, sacred realm. Was this transition symbolic, a metaphor for the passage from life to afterlife? Or was it also designed to enhance ritual performance, focusing attention and movement within the space? The placement of the tombs further deepens the mystery. Many were carved into cliffs overlooking cities, valleys, or trade routes, as if to maintain an eternal presence over the living community. This positioning may have been symbolic, asserting dominance, protection, or connection with the surrounding landscape. Did the Lycians intend for these tombs to serve as guardians, both spiritual and territorial? Were they markers of sacred geography, linking the deceased with stars, mountains, or rivers, creating a cosmic alignment now lost to us? And how much of the location was determined by practical accessibility versus spiritual or ceremonial necessity? The craftsmanship of the Lycian rock tombs reveals both technical skill and artistic sensibility. Each carving exhibits attention to proportion, symmetry, and detail, while also adapting to the irregularities of the cliff face. Columns, reliefs, and pediments were carefully designed to appear harmonious and balanced, even when the stone itself was imperfect. Did the Lycians employ master stonemasons, specialized artisans, or ritual experts to guide this work? And how was knowledge transmitted across generations to ensure the consistency, style, and precision that continues to inspire awe today? Yet for all their grandeur, the Lycian rock tombs retain layers of ambiguity. Despite inscriptions, reliefs, and surviving artifacts, the precise, religious, political, and cultural significance of these tombs remains partially obscured. Were they intended primarily as markers of elite status, as cosmic monuments, or as functional spiritual conduits? Could the positioning, orientation, and carved imagery encode knowledge of celestial cycles, local mythologies, or ancestral traditions? And how much of this symbolic system has been lost, leaving us to interpret it only through stone, shadow, and imagination? Walking along the cliff paths today, one feels the monumentality of the tombs and the intimate craftsmanship of their details simultaneously. The wind sweeps across sheer walls, rustling loose stones and carrying the faint echoes of ceremonies long past. Shadows stretch across carved lions, columns, and pediments, shifting as the day progresses, reminding the observer that these structures were conceived not as static objects, but as experiences unfolding in light, space, and perception. The tombs seem to communicate, silently yet persistently, conveying power, artistry, and belief. But what messages were truly intended for the living, and which were reserved for the departed? The Lycian rock tombs, like Newgrange, Hattusa, and the Beehive tomb of Atreus before them, remind us that ancient structures were designed to engage with multiple dimensions: practical, symbolic, and emotional. They encoded technical knowledge, spiritual belief, and social order into stone, creating spaces that endure as both monuments and enigmas. Yet, for all that archaeology has revealed, the carvings, inscriptions, and artifacts, the ultimate purpose, experience, and meaning of these tombs remain partially veiled. What rituals took place in the cliffside chambers? How were these tombs integrated into the social and spiritual life of Lycian communities? And what knowledge, astronomical, cosmological, or symbolic, was deliberately encoded in the stone, waiting for the patient observer to decode? Standing at the base of a Lycian cliff, gazing upward at the suspended facades, one cannot help but feel the convergence of ambition, skill, and imagination across millennia. The tombs blend architecture, art, landscape, and ritual into a single enduring statement, visible yet mysterious, monumental yet intimate. They challenge modern assumptions about prehistoric and early historic societies, reminding us that human ingenuity is timeless and that the desire to communicate, commemorate, and connect with the cosmos is as old as civilization itself. And yet, as the sun casts long shadows across the valley and light fades from carved pediments, questions remain. What precisely did these tombs mean to their builders, their communities, and the spirits they housed? How much of Lycian knowledge, technical, symbolic, and spiritual, has been lost, leaving only echoes in stone? And what secrets, still hidden within the cliffs, might reveal themselves to those willing to observe with patience, reverence, and imagination? In their quiet majesty, the Lycian rock tombs stand as enduring reminders that some mysteries are not meant to be fully solved, but to inspire wonder, reflection, and the pursuit of understanding across the millennia. Leaving the sunlit cliffs and monumental facades of the Lycian rock tombs behind, our journey returns to the misty, windswept landscapes of northwestern Europe. Across the Irish Sea, on the island of Anglesey, Wales, lies one of Britain's most enigmatic Neolithic monuments, Bryn Celli Ddu. Nestled within gently rolling fields and ancient woodland, this passage tomb appears at first glance as a modest mound of earth and stone. Yet, as with many of the ancient structures we have encountered, from Newgrange to the Cyclopean walls of Hattusa, the outward simplicity belies a remarkable complexity, a carefully orchestrated integration of architecture, ritual, and celestial alignment. How did the builders conceive a monument so precise and yet so subtly harmonized with its landscape? And what knowledge guided its design, its construction, and its orientation to the sun and seasons? Bryn Celli Ddu, whose name translates to the Mound in the Dark Grove, dates to approximately 3000 BCE, situating it firmly in the Neolithic period. Originally constructed as a circular chambered tomb, it was later modified with a long passage and a carefully aligned entrance. This passageway, though narrow and unassuming, reveals extraordinary intent. It is oriented to catch the first rays of the summer solstice sunrise, illuminating the inner chamber in a moment of ephemeral brilliance. How did Neolithic people determine this alignment with such accuracy, using only observation and rudimentary tools? And what did this fleeting illumination signify for the living and the dead, for the community and the ancestors whose remains lay within the chamber? The tomb itself is remarkable for both its architecture and its artistry. The passage and chamber are constructed from large stones, carefully shaped and fitted without mortar, while the surrounding mound of earth provides stability and insulation. Excavations have revealed intricate patterns of stonework, including a carefully recessed entrance and a chamber floor that appears deliberately prepared to accommodate ritual activity. The precision of these features reflects not only technical skill, but a sophisticated understanding of materials, structural balance, and spatial perception. How did these early builders coordinate such labor-intensive work over generations? What social structures, shared knowledge, or spiritual imperatives enabled communities to invest decades of effort into a single monument, knowing that its true meaning might unfold only under rare solar events? Perhaps the most mysterious aspect of Bryn Celli Ddu is its relationship with light, shadow, and time. During the summer solstice, sunlight penetrates the narrow passage, reaching deep into the chamber to illuminate the inner stone in a brief yet powerful spectacle. This phenomenon suggests not only an awareness of solar cycles, but a profound symbolic understanding of the interplay between light, time, and the cycles of life and death. Was this alignment intended to mark the agricultural year, to honor the sun, or to bridge the worlds of the living and the dead? Could the solstice illumination have been part of ritual enactments, guiding ceremonies that connected the community to cosmic order, seasonal change, or ancestral power? Beneath the mound, the chamber reveals additional mysteries. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of burials, cremated remains, and ritual deposits. Yet the exact social and spiritual significance of these interments is unclear. Were they reserved for a select elite, spiritual leaders, or those of particular familial lineage? And how did the placement of bodies, the orientation of the chamber, and the construction of the passage itself communicate meaning to the living and the dead alike? These questions persist because Bryn Celli Ddu, like so many other Neolithic structures, was designed not just to endure physically, but to encode knowledge and experience in ways that may no longer be fully intelligible. The surrounding landscape contributes further layers of intrigue. Bryn Celli Ddu occupies a site rich with pre-existing ritual and symbolic significance, including nearby standing stones, enclosures, and other burial sites. The positioning of the mound may have been dictated not only by practical concerns, visibility, drainage, and access, but by spiritual or cosmological considerations, linking the tomb with the horizon, the sun, and the natural features of Anglesey. How deliberate was this integration of monument and landscape? Could the tomb have been part of a larger network of sacred sites, forming a map of ritual and cosmology across the island? Artistic elements discovered within and around the tomb deepen the mystery. Carved stones, grooves, and patterned surfaces suggest symbolic intent, though their precise meaning is lost to time. Some motifs appear abstract, perhaps representing celestial phenomena, natural cycles, or metaphysical concepts. Others may have served as mnemonic devices for ritual or oral tradition. Did these markings carry esoteric knowledge meant only for initiates? Were they practical, guiding the living in ceremonial practices, or were they purely symbolic, intended to empower the tomb and its interred occupants in ways beyond physical observation? The process of construction itself raises compelling questions. The mound was built in phases. An earlier circular chamber was later transformed into a passage tomb, showing evidence of long-term planning and adaptation. Stones were carefully quarried, transported, and shaped, while laborers coordinated to ensure structural integrity, alignment, and durability. How did Neolithic communities transmit this architectural knowledge across generations, particularly for a monument whose full purpose may have unfolded only during rare astronomical events? What social or spiritual pressures motivated such enduring dedication, especially when the monument's grandeur was largely hidden within a simple earthen mound? Walking along the low grassy rise today, one can sense both the monument's physical presence and its experiential design. The approach, the narrow passage, the momentary sunlight striking the chamber floor, all evoke a deliberate orchestration of perception and emotion. This is a place designed to be experienced, not merely observed, a space where sound, light, shadow, and movement converge to create ritual and reflection. What ceremonies were enacted here, and how did the builders intend participants to experience them? Was the tomb a calendar, a spiritual theater, a monument to ancestors, or all of these simultaneously? And how much of its full meaning remains beyond our comprehension, encoded in design choices, materials, and orientation? Bryn Celli Ddu, like Newgrange, the Lycian rock tombs, and the Beehive tomb of Atreus before it, reminds us that ancient monuments were designed to communicate across time, blending engineering, ritual, and artistry in ways that continue to inspire and challenge us. They are not merely remnants of the past. They are enduring statements of knowledge, belief, and human aspiration. Yet for all the insights archaeology provides, Bryn Celli Ddu retains a quiet, inscrutable power. Its chambers, passage, and alignments continue to provoke questions about the relationship between life and death, humans and cosmos, architecture and experience. Standing upon the low mound in the quiet Anglesey countryside, one feels the monument's reach across millennia. The stones, shaped and arranged with care, speak of skill, devotion, and observation. The solstice light, fleeting and precise, reminds us of cycles both cosmic and human. The surrounding landscape whispers of a culture whose full understanding is lost, yet whose vision endures. What knowledge, astronomical, ritualistic, or symbolic, was encoded in the passage, the chamber, and the carvings? What experiences did the builders intend for the living who approached, the dead who rested within, and the community who observed these sacred rites? And perhaps most hauntingly, how much of this understanding is irretrievably lost, leaving us only with stone, shadow, and the faint echo of human ingenuity reaching across the millennia? Bryn Celli Ddu, in its quiet majesty, invites reflection, contemplation, and wonder. It challenges us to consider the continuity of human aspiration, the desire to connect with ancestors, to mark time, to align earthly and cosmic cycles, and to leave a trace of meaning that endures beyond memory. Its mysteries remain, not as failures of interpretation, but as deliberate reminders that some aspects of human knowledge are subtle, layered, and designed to inspire curiosity for generations yet to come. The mound stands, silent yet eloquent, a testament to the enduring dialogue between people, landscape, and the cosmos, one that continues to unfold each time the sun illuminates its ancient passage, and each time a modern observer dares to wonder what remains hidden within its stones. As we leave the windswept hills of Anglesey and the carefully orchestrated passage of Bryn Celli Ddu behind, our journey turns once more toward the vast landscapes of South America. Here, high in the Peruvian Andes, amid rolling valleys, rocky plateaus, and the whispering presence of ancient civilizations, lies one of the continent's most intriguing enigmas, the Sayhuite stone labyrinth. At first glance, it may seem unassuming, a fractured, weathered rock formation sprawled across a hilltop near the town of Sayhuite. But as the eye traces its carved channels, depressions, and interconnected basins, it becomes clear that this is no ordinary rock. It is an extraordinary feat of human ingenuity, a precise and deliberate miniature landscape etched into stone, a labyrinthine network whose purpose remains deeply mysterious. How was this intricate system carved with such precision? And why did its creators devote so much effort to a project that, for all its complexity, exists at a scale that invites observation yet eludes easy explanation? The Sayhuite stone labyrinth is believed to date from the pre-Inca or early Inca period, though exact chronology remains debated. Its scale and intricacy are immediately striking. The rock surface is densely etched with hundreds of channels, canals, basins, and depressions, forming patterns that suggest rivers, ponds, and irrigation networks. Some channels are narrow and precise, others wide and meandering. Some terminate abruptly, while others interconnect in a web of remarkable continuity. Observers have likened it to a miniature topographical model, a stone map of watersheds, rivers, and lakes. Was this the intent of its creators? To represent a landscape in miniature, as a guide, a teaching tool, or a sacred object? Or does its design conceal functions or meanings we have yet to imagine, perhaps connected to ritual, astronomy, or cosmology? Early explorers and scholars were immediately captivated by the labyrinth's complexity. Unlike the more straightforward agricultural terraces, temples, or fortifications of the Andes, the Sayhuite stone labyrinth challenges conventional categorization. Its precise channels imply knowledge of hydraulics. Water flows through the carved passages in predictable ways, following gradients that mirror natural topography. Experiments have shown that the system can guide water from one basin to another, filling reservoirs or channels in a controlled manner. Was this a practical model for irrigation, a testing ground for water management, or a sacred simulation of rivers and lakes in miniature? Could the labyrinth have functioned as both a technical tool and a symbolic statement, blending the practical with the spiritual in a single, enduring design? The craftsmanship of the labyrinth is both astonishing and puzzling. The rock surface is hard and resistant, yet the channels are carved with smoothness and precision, some only a few centimeters wide, others broad enough to channel significant flow. The gradients of the channels are carefully calculated, allowing water to travel without pooling or overflowing unnecessarily. This level of precision suggests careful observation, planning, and knowledge of hydraulic behavior, yet the methods used by pre-Columbian engineers to achieve this remain unclear. What tools, techniques, and conceptual frameworks did they employ to ensure that water would flow as intended across a rock surface? And what cultural or spiritual imperatives motivated such painstaking attention to detail in a project whose ultimate purpose is still debated? The labyrinth's function continues to generate debate among scholars. Some propose that it was a ceremonial or sacred site, perhaps used in rituals related to water, fertility, or agricultural cycles. Water held immense symbolic importance for Andean cultures, associated with life, sustenance, and the cosmic order. Could the channels and basins have represented rivers of the underworld, or pathways for offerings and libations? Was the labyrinth a place where priests, shamans, or community leaders enacted rites, invoking the spirits of water, mountains, and sky? Or alternatively, was it a pedagogical tool, a physical model used to teach principles of irrigation, water flow, and resource management to engineers or administrators of the time? Beyond function, the labyrinth exudes a symbolic resonance that is difficult to quantify. Viewed from above, the network of channels and basins resembles a miniature landscape, complete with valleys, terraces, and depressions that could mirror actual rivers, lakes, and fields. Could the labyrinth be a microcosm of the Andean environment? a symbolic representation of the relationship between humans and the land, reflecting the careful balance between human intervention and natural forces? Was it meant to communicate knowledge, reinforce cosmological principles, or encode spiritual beliefs in a tangible, experiential form? And if so, what layers of meaning are now lost to us, buried beneath centuries of erosion, cultural change, and forgotten tradition? The scale of labor required to create the labyrinth is itself remarkable. The stone is hard and resistant, the surface uneven and exposed to wind and rain. Yet the channels were carved with meticulous care, each depression and conduit precisely calculated to fit a larger system. How many hands worked on this monument, and over how many years or generations? Did the creators approach the project as artisans, engineers, priests, or all three simultaneously? And how was knowledge transmitted, maintained, and refined, allowing such a sophisticated system to emerge in an era without written hydraulic manuals or modern measurement tools? Exploring the labyrinth today, one can trace the channels with the eyes, imagining water flowing through the intricate network, filling basins and connecting with other depressions. The effect is both practical and mystical, a blend of observation and imagination, science and ritual. It invites contemplation. How did the creators perceive this miniature landscape, and how did they intend participants to experience it? Was the labyrinth a model to predict or manipulate water flows, a sacred stage for ritual enactments, or a symbolic representation of the Andean world? Perhaps, as with many ancient monuments, its true function encompassed all of these possibilities simultaneously, blending utility, art, and spiritual intent in a single integrated design. The labyrinth's location further reinforces its enigmatic nature. Situated on a rocky hill, it overlooks valleys, rivers, and distant mountains, commanding a perspective both practical and symbolic. Could this elevated position have been chosen for visibility, spiritual potency, or both? Did its placement in the landscape create connections with other sacred sites, rivers, or natural phenomena, forming a network of ritual and cosmological reference points? And if so, how much of that network has been disrupted, leaving us with only the labyrinth itself as a solitary, enigmatic trace of a larger, interconnected system? Carving and maintaining such a structure would have required not only skill and labor, but also knowledge of erosion, rainfall, and water behavior. Channels must have been carefully graded to ensure correct flow, and the placement of basins designed to capture and direct water predictably. Were the builders guided purely by empirical observation, or did they possess theoretical knowledge of hydraulics, geometry, and natural forces, encoded in ways now lost to history? And if the labyrinth served ritual purposes, was its functional precision also an element of spiritual power, a tangible expression of control over nature, or a bridge between the human and divine? What further deepens the mystery is the labyrinth's relationship with the broader Andean cultural and ceremonial landscape. Nearby ceremonial centers, terraces, and settlements suggest a highly organized society adept at agriculture, trade, and ritual practice. How did the labyrinth integrate with these systems? Was it a tool for planning irrigation, a ceremonial site for elites, or a symbolic representation of cosmology visible only to the initiated? And how much of its design and meaning depended on performance, observation, or participation, rather than passive presence? The Sayhuite stone labyrinth, like Bryn Celli Ddu, Newgrange, and the Lycian rock tombs, exemplifies a recurring principle in ancient structures. They encode multiple layers of knowledge, ritual, and experience, enduring long after the people who built them have disappeared. Its channels, basins, and contours are simultaneously technical, artistic, and symbolic, inviting interpretation but resisting definitive explanation. We can measure the slopes, trace the channels, and observe water behavior, yet the full intention, experience, and cosmological meaning remain just out of reach. As the Andes wind whistles across the hilltop, the labyrinth presents itself as both a practical and mystical creation, a work of art, science, and spiritual reflection. It asks us to consider the sophistication of pre-Columbian societies, their understanding of hydrology, geometry, and ritual, and their desire to capture and shape both the material and immaterial world. What knowledge was encoded in the stone channels, basins, and miniature landscape? How were these systems experienced, taught, and honored by the people who created them? And what truths, if any, remain hidden within the labyrinth, waiting for discovery by those willing to observe, imagine, and contemplate with patience and reverence? Standing upon the hill, tracing the carved pathways with the mind's eye, one senses the layers of human intention, the practical, the symbolic, and the spiritual woven together into a single stone tapestry. The labyrinth endures as a dialogue across millennia, a convergence of knowledge, creativity, and belief, silently challenging our assumptions and inspiring wonder. It reminds us that the pursuit of understanding is ongoing, that some knowledge may be deliberately hidden or encoded in ways that demand engagement, insight, and imagination. And as the sun illuminates channels, basins, and tiny depressions, we are reminded that the labyrinth's mysteries remain alive, inviting reflection, study, and the eternal question: what was truly intended by those who shaped stone into miniature rivers, ponds, and pathways, and what remains just beyond our grasp, still waiting to be discovered?